All right, good evening, and I'll call the meeting to order, and I've got some opening remarks. The public meeting is being heard by the City Council Planning Advisory Committee, and public notice has been given in accordance with the Planning Act. The non-elected members of the Planning Advisory Committee are Mr. John Beltutis, Mr. David Joyce, Ms. Catherine Brown, and Mr. Paul Jennings. Citizen appointees may ask questions and participate in the discussion in order to assist in making recommendations to City Council, but may not make motions or vote in connection with the public meeting. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Planning Committee or City Council before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of City Council or the local Planning Appeal Board. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Belleville before the related bylaw is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal, unless in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party. Comments received at this public meeting, as well as written comments, will be considered by the Engineering and Development Services Department in analysis of the applications that were part of the public meeting tonight. For further information on how to provide comments to the city regarding an application from this public meeting, please email planning@belleville.ca. A recommendation report will be brought forward upon receipt of all agency and public comments in the future. Any persons wishing to be advised of the Belleville Planning Advisory Committee's recommendations with respect to today's applications are requested to leave their name and address with the city clerk. So thank you. And with that, call attendance here. I see everyone's here and Mayor Panchuk is included. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll go to the public meeting. 3.1, notice of public meeting for application for revised proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, 99 Millennium Parkway, part of lots 29 and 30, Plan 22, Part 6, Plan 21R-2584, City of Belleville, file numbers B-77-1105. Owner is 273-7778 Ontario Limited, and the applicant is Sunny Punia. If I could have staff present the application, please.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. So this is this application is a resubmission of a rezoning application for a proposed hotel development at the property that we now refer to as 99 Millennium Parkway. The initial application proposed to rezone the property from a service industrial exception 2 holding zone to a highway commercial zone to permit a 5-story hotel development with a number of site-specific provisions, which included increased maximum building height and a reduced required landscaping strip. Following the initial public meeting in August of 2020, and in consideration to submissions made by the public in regard to the initial proposed development, the applicant has revised their application to propose a rezoning to a highway commercial zone to permit a 4-story hotel development. Similar special provisions are requested. However, the rear landscape strip has been widened. And you can see that in the site plan in the top right corner of the slide on the screen. The subject property is designated commercial in the official plan. Public correspondence has been received since the publication of the initial planning report. This will be included and addressed in the staff recommendation report for the application. I will pass it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And we have Nitin Malhotra to make a presentation on the application. Okay, Nitin Malhotra, you are in the meeting. If you want to unmute.
There we go. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Glad to be back here again for the 3rd time. But it's always a pleasure to see everybody. I hope everybody is doing well in Belleville. And so we are all set to make the presentation. If I can request someone to, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so like we've been here before, and like I mentioned, this is really our third time making this presentation at in front of everybody. The first slide itself, as Desta was pointing out, it's pretty. You can see the efforts that our client Sunny has made in making the changes. Like I said, we've been here twice. We've heard the comments from the committee members. We also heard some comments from the neighbors, and there was some concern that they didn't really want a 5-story high building. So when the client initially bought the land, he had a certain yield in mind, as most of the developers do. But taking into the comments received, we have now deleted one full floor. So that's a loss of around 23 rooms, and revenue and everything else you can think about. But this is what the owner has agreed to do. There was some comments last time about we had shown only 3 or 4 trees towards the north side of the property. That's between us and the residential neighborhood at the back. So we sent the surveyor back on the site. So the surveyor went, the arborist went, we mapped out all the existing trees, and then the landscape architect redid the drawings to make sure that we have enough of a buffer on the south side. In fact, on the renderings, the trees you see, we were explicitly requested by the city staff that we show the trees in their initial stage, so it's almost right after they have been planted. So this is not the trees being shown with their full foliage, but the trees when they're right after, the fact that they have been planted. And we have a couple of sections that we'll show as the presentation unfolds itself, that what this would look like when the trees are in their full bloom. As Desta was mentioning, we have also increased the landscape strip at the back. Some additional fencing has been added. And those are the high-level changes that we have done to this development to hopefully make it more palatable to everybody. Next slide, please. So a quick project description. The proposed development is a new 4-story now, a 4-story True by Hilton hotel with 72 rooms. The building will have a gross floor area of about 3,000 square meters. The site will contain 101 parking spaces. The property boundary will include new planting, buffering the hotel from neighboring properties. The building will be of contemporary design with EIFS finishes. The west entrance will include a guest drop-off porte cochere. The proposed building will be serviced by new municipal water and sewer. The subject lands will be required rezoning to allow for hotel use. The next slide talks about provincial policy statement. If everyone is in agreement, I would prefer to skip it. I think we have seen this slide twice already just from us. So we could flip that and move straight off to the City of Belleville official plan. So now this committee members, and from our point of view, is a little bit important, and I'm just going to go through it again. So the subject land is designated commercial in the City of Belleville official plan in accordance with sections 3.12C and 3.12D. The proposed development is in the Belleville Boulevard area. Now, the Bell Boulevard is one of the 4 district areas of major commercial activity. And from what we have found, a hotel use is permitted in the Bell Boulevard area. So as we all know, the official plan, nudges the zoning bylaw, as it were. This is the direction. It's more up to date. So the official plan is stating that this area hotel is a permitted use. And once again, we are not going for an official plan amendment. It's just a zoning bylaw amendment. And what's dovetailing that is the approved official plan by the city of Belleville, which once again does allow for a hotel in this area. Now, the Bell Boulevard area's role as a major focus of employment and retail activity within the region would be enhanced through development of retail, highway, commercial, and recreational commercial uses. As a gateway to the community, the image of the Bell Boulevard area should be enhanced through policies emphasizing a high level of urban design, coordination of separate developments to function cooperatively, landscaping, and efficient traffic circulation. The proposed 4-story hotel building with high level of urban design, coordinated landscaping now, which has been made more robust, and functional vehicular circulation would create landmark for the commercial area of Bell Boulevard. Next slide, please. So the next slide depicts site and the surrounding area. The subject site is located north of Highway 401 on Millennium Parkway between Cloverleaf Drive and Sydney Street. The total site area is approximately 0.61 hectares, with the land covered currently with just grass and foliage. The subject lands are currently undeveloped and do not contain any existing buildings or structures. The property is surrounded by Millennium Parkway and vacant land to the south, low-rise residential to the north, community living on the adjacent property to the west, and medical services on the adjacent property to the east. Next slide, please. So I think this is, again, a fairly important slide as well. And you can see our site has been marked with this red rectangle. And obviously to the north of our site, we can see this residential development. But right to the south of this residential development, you see this plethora of different kind of uses, which are very interesting. So it's our site, and to the right of our site, we have a paramedic. To the left of our site is community living. Then we have the commercial offices, which I believe belong to Maple Leaf. Then there's a sushi takeout place. There's a self-storage place. There is a car wash. And then from across the Millennium Parkway, there seems to be well, it's an auto mall. Like any brand you can think of is probably right there. So there was a lot of discussion, by the neighbors that when they bought the house, they were not thinking that a development such as, for example, a hotel would crop up in their backyard. And we are really sorry, and I beg to differ. Well, what exactly were they thinking? A quick drive around the neighborhood and their own backyard would clearly state that they've really bought a house or about to buy a house that's really on the edge. This is not a quintessential neighborhood with houses backing back to back. The strip that is to the north of my client's property, this is really an edge. So they bought a house in R1 zone, fully prepared that to the south of them is probably going to be anything but a residential development, and they don't have to go to a website or open a book. They just have to drive around their own neighborhood to see what's going on. Next slide, please. So these are some neighboring buildings and uses. We have the community living right next to us. We have the paramedics on the other side. As mentioned before, we also have some commercial offices. And then we have the slew of dealerships to the south of Millennium Parkway. So these are the existing uses. Next slide. So this slide talks about the current zoning, which our site has been allocated. So currently the site is a highway commercial C1 zone. And on the right of our slide, you can see the permitted uses that the zoning bylaw permits my client to put on this site. If he would have chosen one of these uses, we probably wouldn't even be here having this discussion. Probably it would have been a straightforward site plan application. Some of these uses are assembly, fabrication, manufacturing, supply outlet, warehouses, wholesale establishment, bank buildings could be pretty high as well, because I think 3 or 4, story building is permitted. Convenience store, a steel eating establishment, which we do have in the neighborhood, in form of a sushi restaurant, garden center, wholesale lumber yard, recreational facilities, public use, service shops, car garages, maybe a gas station, office space, high buildings, lot of windows, and retail commercial services. These are all permitted uses. Then the rest of the slide talks about the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is required to rezone the lands from service industrial S1 2H zone to highway commercial C1 zone, as the current zoning does not permit hotel under the provisions of the Thurlow zoning bylaw. As amended with site-specific development standards are required to facilitate the construction of the proposed hotel. So just to make sure, the current zoning is service industrial S1 to H, and the proposed zoning is highway commercial through which we are trying to propose a hotel on this property. And all the uses listed on the right side are the current service industrial uses. So what we are requesting is a reduction in the minimum required front yard, reduction in the minimum required side yard, increase in maximum permitted height from 11 meters to 14.5 meters. 11 meters is a 3-story high permitted building that someone can actually put on the site. Reduction in landscaping strip, reduction in parking space width from 3 to 2.4 meters, reduction in parking drive aisle width from 7 to 6.7 meters. Next slide, please. So this slide is pretty interesting. This is a what if slide. What if our client, instead of putting a hotel, and it's just not a drive-through motel or a Super 8, it's really a Hilton. It's really one of the best products you can put, if you're in the hospitality business. So instead of doing that, if my client chose to use this land for a permitted use, such as a wholesale lumberyard with all the trucks driving in, people coming up, workers coming up to pick the products up, or let's say a big, huge, gigantic warehouse building, or a garden center, for example, with, again, lots of glass, lots of reflection, people coming in and out. What about assembly and fabrication and light manufacturing? Again, a busy building with workers, in their backyard. Next slide, please. And this is, again, one of the what if slides. What about a recreational facility? It's a permitted use. Could be a hockey arena with people coming in, driving through, lots of noise, lots of cars going in and out. We have some examples, more examples of assembly, fabrication, light manufacturing building. We're not showing any smokestacks, but we are not really far away from the pictures that we are depicting. So all of these uses, committee members, are permitted uses as per right granted by the city's zoning bylaw. Instead of doing all of this, my client is proposing a top of the line hotel brand. Next slide, please. So this is the site plan that we have all seen before, except that now on the north side, we have a more robust landscape strip. As mentioned before, the number of floors has been reduced from 5 to 4 stories. Consequently, the number of suites have also been reduced to only 72 suites. Some of the other features of this development are the property is located at the north side of Millennium Parkway. Total area is about 6,000 square meters. Frontage is about 53 meters. Coverage as proposed is 13.8%. Landscape area as proposed is now 23%. parking exceeds the minimum requirement of 101 spaces. So we currently have almost 10 additional spaces than required. The site is proposed to have one vehicular access point, so one entrance. The entrance also acts as a fire route to the site. The delivery truck loading would be located at the rear of the building along with the Moloch garbage system away from the street edge. Next slide, please. Depicts the main floor of the hotel, which is a very standard floor plan these days with a porte cochere, an entrance lobby, reception, breakfast area, a fitness center, laundry room, meeting room, a small meeting room, and then some guest rooms. Next slide, please. So this is a typical second to fourth floor plan, and this slide used to be typical second to fifth floor, and now it's only 4-story, as we know. Each story has about 23 rooms. So by sacrificing a floor, our client in effect has given up 23 rooms. So, we have about 43 king suites, 21 double queen suites, 5 accessible king suites, and 3 double queen accessible suites. Next slide, please. This is the cross-section that we were talking about. We believe it's a fairly accurate cross-section. Going north-south, so we see our proposed hotel on the right side, and then we have the residential house right behind our property on the left side. And we have done a couple of cone of vision analysis. And to the best of our knowledge and what we have depicted, once the landscape is in full bloom and foliage, the hotel building will not be visible. Next slide. These are some 3D renderings. Members, there was also some hue and cry last time about as if we are trying to fake the model. We are trying to basically play around with dimensions and whatnot. And your city staff did their due diligence, and the actual 3D model in the software on which it was developed, which is called SketchUp, was actually provided to the city staff so they could actually check if our model indeed was drawn accurately, and it was. And so there are no issues on that front. This slide depicts 4 elevations. We have the west elevation, south elevation, and we have the east elevation. South elevation is obviously the elevation facing Millennium. West elevation would be the main elevation facing, having porte cochere. And we also have the east elevation. But the most important elevation on this slide is the north elevation, showing a measly 3 windows only looking at the north side. And these 3 windows are part of the common corridor. That was another one of the, remarks or comments that people would be staring in their backyards. Of the 72 rooms that we have, committee members, we have only 3 windows facing north, and also those 3 windows do not belong to any room. They're part of a public corridor, and if required, we could have them as frosted glass. So absolutely, there wouldn't be any. Light would come through, but people will not be able to see outside, if they really wanted to. Next slide, please. And we have some more perspective views of our building. We have the view from the Millennium Parkway going both ways. We have the northwest view and we have the aerial view. And once again, I would like to remind everybody of the slides that we have seen, what's there currently in the neighborhood, number 1, and what is actually permitted by right under the current zoning bylaw. And this is what we are proposing. To the best of our knowledge, ability, and what we have seen, this we think is, not a bad thing for this neighborhood, considering what's around them and considering what can actually come if someone were to come and say, listen, I'm going to follow the zoning bylaw to the T. We are proposing a Hilton in their backyard. We've accommodated most, if not all, of their requests by reducing the height, by allowing a more robust landscape, a buffer to be provided. Next slide, please. And once again, I would like to close this presentation with the same slide that I started the presentation, showcasing our proposed development, which we feel will only enhance the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go any further, I see Councillor Williams had his screen darkened. Councillor Williams, do you want to declare a conflict on this one?
Yes, sir. Sorry, I missed you there. I was way ahead of the agenda. 3.1 and 6.1 today, sir. So I've been out of this and I won't be participating in any debate. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll actually remove you out of the meeting and the clerk will note that. Thank you, Mr. Malhotra, for your presentation. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Again, thank you, Mr. Malhotra. Next individual is Sunny. I apologize with the pronunciation. Pania. He's the owner applicant. Okay, there's okay, there's a message that he's there. Okay, bear with us as we stick handle through this. Okay, Sunny Pania, I apologize for your pronunciation of your last name. You're in the meeting. If you'd like to unmute your microphone, and I don't know if you have video as well, but you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, thank you for taking the time and letting us do the presentation. Nitin made a lot of good points, and I'm just here to answer any questions that you guys might have of me. Okay, thank you. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Okay, thank you very much. And as I go through the participant list, John and Donna Duncan speaking against the application. We have a lot of participants in queue, as you can imagine, so it's a matter of IT finding the participant and adding them to the meeting. Okay, so I have the Duncans are in the meeting. If you'd like to unmute your microphone, and if you have video as well, you can.
Sure. Hi, everybody.
The floor is yours.
Excellent. This is my name's John Duncan. I live at 94 Cloverleaf Drive, and I'm here with my wife, Donna. And after hearing Mr. Nitin Malhotra speak, I'm not only offended by the way that he spoke about the community, I would like to ask him how much money he's donated to the local hospital during this pandemic, or how much his hotel is going to devalue his property. My property has been assessed at $40,000 below the market value should you put a four-story hotel in my backyard. So has my neighbor's property 2 doors down. We pay taxes in this community. We live in this community. And I find it offensive when somebody completely disregards us, uses talk like human cry. I don't know what that means. I know it's offensive. Sonny was at my house prior to this last meeting we had. And I apologize to, again, Mr. Malhotra for having to be here 3 times, but it is a major pandemic. And we don't have the ability as citizens to be able to come forward and speak in a public forum other than this. So unfortunately, this is the way we have to do it. I live in this community. I know where Bell Boulevard is. I'd like you guys, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, to go back to figure 1, aerial picture of the surrounding area, if that would be possible.
We have that built. Just 1 second.
I'd appreciate it.
And which page are you looking for again?
I'm looking for, it is site and surrounding area, figure 1, aerial picture of surround contest. Right there, right here. Have a look at that right there. Now, if you wouldn't mind, could you please have Mr. Nitin Malhotra or Sonny point out to me where Bell Boulevard is in that picture?
Well, they've actually already participated in the meeting. So if this was under normal circumstances, you would be at a podium.
Certainly. And Sonny had mentioned that he was here to answer questions. So I was going to ask him, where in this picture does it show Bell Boulevard? Our problem is not with the fact that the land is being developed. Our problem is with the fact that we're going to change 4 laws, devalue our property values, and change the rules that have been the rules for everybody else. They pointed out all of our neighbors, but what they didn't point out was the fact that all of our neighbors followed all the rules, regulations, laws of the land in order to build those particular sites. I'm sure had any of those neighbors had the opportunity, like a car dealership being able to build a parking garage to saying cost on land costs, I'm sure all of these things would have come into play. But they didn't have that luxury because there was rules and regulations in play that made it so that that could not take place. What we are doing here today is not arguing the fact that if a hotel was going in our backyard, and yes, by the way, we do have the ability to drive in our neighborhood and find out where we live. But what we are saying is that should there be laws allowing that type of thing to take place, then it wouldn't be a big thing if it happened. Another one of his figures was the zoning bylaw amendment slide, the what if possibilities, when he had a chemical plant in the area. The problem with putting a chemical plant on that particular piece of property is, again, it wouldn't fit. So I find it to be a waste of council's time and a waste of our time to show things that have no possible way of not only fitting on the property, but they wouldn't be able to be put there, and saying that these would be the competitive businesses that would be there when there's 15 or 30 competitive businesses on that road already, none of which were any that were in the pictures that were displayed here for us today. I did have Sonny at my house. I heard Mr. Nitin Malhotra repeatedly state that he was doing us a service by reducing the size of this building from 5 stories to 4 stories. But the funny thing about that is Mr. Sonny at my door, prior to the last meeting that we had with council, informed me and my wife that he was going to probably be building this building at 4 stories anyways, so it wouldn't be a problem for us. Now, I heard it probably 25 to 30 times out of Mr. Nitin Malhotra's mouth that he had made this exceptional exception based upon the human cry of the people that live in the neighborhood. But I'm here to tell you, none of us are crying. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we have a situation where city council is in the, is able to disregard multiple, in that slide that he had up to earlier, more than 6 laws that are in place right now in order to accommodate this person who habitually says that they're on Bell Boulevard. We've seen the slide. We're nowhere near Bell Boulevard. You have to go over the 401. It is literally a kilometer from my house to get to Bell Boulevard. So as you can see, after I was calm and collected, I wanted to have a rational conversation with you folks, but to hear a man be so disrespectful of a community that he's never lived in, has never provided anything back to, and talk about the people that live in this community, not just the business neighbors, but the citizens like myself, my wife, and the neighbors that you're going to hear from shortly. We all live in this community, and it'd be nice to have a business partner that got along with us, not one that was condescending and rude to us prior to us even having an opportunity to say our piece. That is my rant.
Well, I just wanted to say one thing, and the rendering doesn't seem to be very accurate because it shows the community living as this huge building, and it's not.
Yeah, pull up community living.
So it looks huge compared to the hotel. And the other thing is that the neighboring businesses, they work during business hours. So it's completely different than a hotel. There's going to be people right beyond our fence line you know, coming back from a concert or kids are playing hockey, that's where they're going to play, right past our fence line there. It's completely different. It's really difficult to make that comparison because it's just not the same.
And one more thing, we have had 5 or 6 or 7 new hotels built in this area. Belleville's fastest growing city in Canada, or third, second. Congratulations to all of us. But Bell Boulevard has got 4 or 5 new hotels going on down there, all of which are between 4 and 5 stories. There's new hotels on Front Street that are in the 4 and 5 story range. Have a look at the size of those hotels. We wouldn't be arguing this if it was a piece of land suitable for a building of this size. But what they're doing by reducing the size of a parking space is increasing the damage to everybody's cars that park there. I just find it such a lack of respect for everybody that would be utilizing the building or everybody in the neighborhood of the building. I mean, if they wanted to put up a motel there with 30 rooms, fine.
Completely different.
Completely different situation. This is a 4-story monstrosity in our backyard on a piece of land that's not large enough to sustain it, in a community that doesn't want it. And to be repeatedly telling us that it's on Bell Boulevard, when again, a Bell Boulevard is on the other side of the 401. I'll tell you, I was really looking forward to this meeting, and after hearing Mr. Malhotra speak earlier tonight, I can't believe he could have such disdain for a group of people he's never met.
Okay.
That's
Is that it for comments?
That's it.
So, yeah.
Council, I appreciate everything you've done
Well,
for all of
Thank
us
you
during
so
the
much.
pandemic. You guys have been awesome. Matt, Pat, the way that you've stuck up for small business, I own a small business. I'm proud of each and every one of you, and thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to speak to you tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Okay, thank you again for your presentation.
Have a good night, guys.
Next will be Chris and Kate Donaldson, and we'll get them in the meeting here. Okay, so the Donaldsons are in the meeting. You want to just unmute your microphone, and if you have video, you can select that as well. And you just have to unmute your microphone.
Trying.
There you go.
Okay, there we are.
The floor is yours. Good evening.
Thank you. John is very passionate. We love John. He's just recently a new neighbor, and I can't tell you, we've lived on this street. My husband's lived on the street most of his life, and John is very passionate, but we are total in agreement with what John has had to say, particularly this gentleman that we've never met before, talking about that, you know, we should be privileged to have a Hilton in our backyard. If this was a motel, total different story. This is not a motel. This is a large building. Anyway, I have something prepared if you'll allow me to speak for a minute, please.
Sure.
Kate Donaldson, my husband, Chris. Chris moved to Cloverleaf Drive when he was 2. He grew up on the street, and 35 years ago, he built our family home that we raised 5 boys in. Chris loves to reminisce about how he and his brothers used to take their snowmobiles, and dirt bikes up behind their house and ride for hours. In our backyard, where you can see all this development has happened, there used to be ponds where we would take our children skating on. I'm sure many of the residents on our streets could share familiar stories, the good old days of Cloverleaf Drive. I get it. Development happens, change happens. But now we're facing development on all sides of us. To the north, we have subdivisions stretching as far as you can see. To the south, we have businesses and car dealerships. To the west, we have Taste of Country. To the east, we have Walmart and Lowe's, etc. We feel like we are being boxed in. And now they want to put a 5-story hotel in our backyard. Sorry, 4-story hotel. At some point in time, we need to say enough is enough. Come on. The proposal of a hotel that backs up against our properties on Cloverleaf Drive takes away what little privacy and peace and quiet we have left. We have a pool in our backyard and we spend a lot of time outside there in the summer. We have 6 grandchildren under 6 that spend a lot of time in our pool. They like to change their bathing suits on the deck and have a nature pee if they need to. We shouldn't have to worry about a hotel towering over our property or people are able to look in their windows and see what's going on. I'm going to interject here for a second because I know one of the comments that was made was that behind the building that there would be 3 windows. That's just the property that it faces. We are to the west of the property, and I could see a lot more windows to the west that would be overlooking our backyard. If you haven't already, I urge you to come and see the small parcel of land that they're planning on building a hotel on. Someone said to me, go and look at that hotel on Bell Boulevard and then come and look at that small parcel of land in your backyard. Can you imagine a hotel of that size there? I can't. I have taken a drive along Bell Boulevard and looked at the hotels and think there's no way it could possibly fit on that small parcel of land. As I think about the hotels in this area, as a matter of fact, none of them back up against residential properties. As a matter of fact, as a hockey mom, I've spent a lot of times in hotels in the province, and I can't think of one that once I look out the window, I can see houses. Usually it's a busy street or a parking lot or other businesses. The residents of the Cloverleaf Drive are also concerned about the decline in our property values that a hotel on a property would cause. No one wants a hotel in their backyard. We've even heard of some residents that are going to feel that they need to put their houses up for sale if the proposal goes through. That's unacceptable. We shouldn't have to do that. There's a reason that the bylaws were put in place on the land on Millennium Parkway to protect the residential properties that butt up against Cloverleaf Drive. The residents of Cloverleaf Drive strongly oppose the rezoning of this property and ask that members of the committee reject the submission of the applicant to have the property rezoned. We have a petition that we've presented at the last meeting that is still in effect, that the people of Cloverleaf Drive are against having a building of this size in our backyards. After the presentation that was made earlier, there are a lot of things that come to mind when he was speaking about, again, about all the revisions and things that they've done to appease us. It's still a 4-story building, whether it's 4-story, 5-story. We also have to look at where he's talking about putting the shrubs in the backyard. It's going to take 20 years at least for those to grow so that you're not going to be able to see out of that hotel into the neighboring yards. As I said before, enough is enough. We're boxed in. At least give us this and say, okay, a hotel is not suitable for the land on Millennium Parkway. Thanks very much. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions from committee members?
Come on,
No.
ask me a question.
I think you might have covered everything.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. And the next participant is Nancy La Rochelle. Okay, Nancy La Rochelle, you are in the meeting. If you want to unmute your microphone, and if you have,
Okay, can you hear me now?
yes, I can. You,
Okay.
you're in the meeting, and you have the floor.
Okay, well, I just want to support and agree with everything that Kate and Chris and Mr. Duncan and his wife have said. I too was offended by the attitude of Mr. Malhotra. I've been there 22 years. There was no Millennium Parkway when I first bought my property. So I didn't assume that there was going to be a 4-star hotel or 4-level hotel above my backyard or looking into my backyard. Some other things that concern me is the shading, the sunlight, and the lack of sunlight that may happen with a building of that size on my backyard, because I'm directly behind it, or north of it. The other thing is the light pollution that happens. When some of the buildings were put in, when I first moved there, I still remember sitting out in my backyard the first week I was there and looking at the sun or at the stars at night. And then along came progress, and my backyard was no longer dark enough to see the stars at night because of the buildings that are there now. And this is just going to add to that. I'm worried about the noise in this from a place that size. Dumpsters. There's going to be dumpsters. I didn't notice any dumpsters in the picture, but I'm sure they'll have some. Service vehicles coming and going. He talked about that for some of the legal, acceptable uses of the property, and about traffic. Well, I don't see how this is going to be any less in terms of noise and traffic of any of the places that he said would be acceptable. My normal activities in my backyard, I'm concerned about that, because just knowing that people may be looking and watching what you're doing at that time. People be coming and going in this building that we've never met. Strangers, who knows what kind of types of people would be there or come in there, and what that might do to the safety and security of our area as well. The whole street started out as kind of semi-rural, and now it's turning into commercial industrial. Not a good plan, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, thank you for your time. I hope I made sense somewhere.
Yeah, we've got a number of points here. Yes, thank you. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Okay, thank you very much. So I need a motion to refer that to the Planning Advisory Committee. Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Kelly. All in favor? Motion's carried. Moving on to 3.2, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 10-245, and proposed draft plan of subdivision, Hanley Park North, part of lot 14, concession 1, City of Belleville, file numbers B-77-1115 and 12T-20001. Owner is Hanley Park Developments Incorporated. Agent is Macaulay Shomi Housing Limited. If I could have staff present the application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll just get the presentation slide going. Oh, thank you, Mark. The subject land is 35.2 hectares in size and is zoned residential holding exception 1 zone, holding zone, and environmental control zone. 2 applications were concurrently submitted for a rezoning and a draft plan of subdivision application over the subject land in order to facilitate a new 156 unit residential subdivision referred to as Hanley Park North. So that's the draft plan of subdivision at the top right corner of the presentation slide, as well as an aerial view of the subject lands. The proposed subdivision would consist of 99 single detached dwellings, 57 townhouse units, park, walkways, and a stormwater management facility as proposed. The proposed zoning includes 2 residential 4th density zones with varying special provisions, residential 5th density zone with special provisions, open space zone, and environmental control zone. The proposed subdivision is within the city's urban serviced area and is designated residential, environmental protection, and rural under the official plan. Staff have received a large number of public submissions regarding the application. All submissions will be included and addressed in the recommendation report. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will pass it back to you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to mention here that we have 23 participants listed for this application. And so I'm going to be mindful of the time. We have a number of residents wanting to speak against the application. I would just ask that, and we will invite you into the meeting, and that way you're on the record, but I would ask that you not repeat anything that's already been discussed, but if there's something new or that you just want to acknowledge for the purpose of getting on the file, but just be mindful of time. So thank you. So with that, we have Laura Lee Jones presenting the application. Oh, sorry. Ms. Brown?
Actually, I put up my hand. Councillor Williams should be let back in.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Brown, is that what you were Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, Councillor Williams. We were stick handling too many people here.
Thank you to Mr. Joyce for letting me back in. So thank you very much.
Okay, so I have Laura Lee Jones wanting to, will make a presentation on the application. Laura Lee Jones, you are in the meeting. If you unmute your microphone. Good evening, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. My name is Lorelei Jones, and I am the planning consultant acting on behalf of the owners. Before I get started, I just want to introduce that I have 3 members of the consulting team with me tonight. So I have Michael Mikowski of Mikowski Nielsen Associates, who is the environmental consultant, Caitlin Sheehan of Ainley and Associates, who is the municipal engineering consultant, and Dave Halpenny of DJ Halpenny and Associates, who is the traffic consultant. So I'm doing a presentation, but I wanted committee to be aware of the fact that those 3 people are available to answer questions as well. I appreciate that you have a lot to cover tonight, so I will try and be brief. If I could have the next slide, please. As Desta had outlined, this is a location map that shows the subject property, and we're located north of Victoria and east of Hague Road. The site contains 34.3 hectares, or roughly 85 acres of land. The owner did hold their own public information session on February the 23rd. We had about 40 people participating in it. We had a variety of questions. We provided a much more extensive presentation to those people than we will be providing tonight. And we were able to answer some of their questions and concerns. Next slide, please. So I've colored up the draft plan of subdivision to illustrate for committee that we are in fact trying to retain a large portion of the property in its current natural state. We recognize that a number of concerns have been expressed about protection of these lands. So the medium green color on your slide shows both the areas that are identified as wetland, the 30-meter buffer to that wetland, and then also some lands that are in the middle of the property that are not wetland or floodplain, but which are not accessible unless you cross the wetland and are therefore not proposed for development. So in total, we have 59 acres of land, which we are not proposing to develop. And then we do have the areas for the subdivision highlighted in various colors. The light yellow color before you are the larger single detached lots. The beige colored lots are the smaller single detached lots, and then the darker yellow / orangey color are the townhouse lots. The dark green is proposed parkland, and the blue is the stormwater management pond. So in consultation with our environmental consultant, we have identified that there's an opportunity to be providing for walkways through the area. We recognize the fact that the public has used these lands for walking on in the past. We would like to indicate that, of course, these are private lands. They're not publicly owned lands. And that through this subdivision, there is in fact an opportunity for the city or the conservation authority to acquire these lands, because we are proposing to dedicate the 59 acres that are shown in the medium green to either the city or the conservation authority. And therefore there is an opportunity to be retaining some of the existing trails through the property right now and possibly adding to them. And that's certainly something that we're happy to talk to staff about in terms of, how that can be addressed, recognizing that it is something that's important to the community. So as I mentioned, there are buffers around the wetland that are 30 meters. The only exception to that is around the stormwater management pond, where we're providing a buffer of 25 meters. So it's a wide buffer. Within that buffer area, the lands will be retained in their natural state as well, except for where there would be something like a wood chip path through those lands. And with respect to the stormwater buffer only being 25 meters, it will be vegetated with natural vegetation to ensure that it provides for some additional function through that as well. With respect to this subdivision, the main access to it is through the extension of the existing Tessa Boulevard, where the main subdivision is located. We have provided for an emergency exit for this subdivision through the stormwater management pond that exists to the west of it, I should say. It is a wet pond. But I wanted to emphasize for people that it is an emergency access. So in other words, it's not going to be used on a daily basis, not even a monthly basis. It will be a very rare circumstance where the emergency access needs to be used. It would only be used where emergency vehicles need to get into the subdivision and for some reason Tessa Boulevard was blocked. So it is literally that, just an emergency access. One of the concerns that we also heard expressed from our public meeting was construction vehicle access, and we will be working with staff again during the more detailed analysis to come up with construction access location that helps to avoid some of that traffic on Tessa Boulevard and to address as much as we can in terms of the impacts from that to minimize that on the existing residents of the area. Next slide, please. When we were putting together the subdivision application, one of the things that staff requested us to do was to give an illustration of the kinds of development that we thought would be developed on this. And so the owners have had architects take a look at the 3 different lot sizes that are being proposed and to provide illustrations of the kind of residential development that we are anticipating would occur. So the townhouses are on the left, the small lot singles are in the middle, and the larger 50-foot lots are on the right-hand side of your screen. Next slide, please. So these lands are designated residential, environmental protection, and rural. The rural are the light yellow lands, and we are not proposing development on those lands at this point in time. The green is obviously environmental protection. And so you can see that there's actually a larger area of land that's designated for residential purposes than we're proposing to develop. And that we have looked at some of the existing official plan policies in terms of the density of development that's permitted, the kinds of residential development that should be occurring within a residential area, and the policy state that ideally all neighborhoods should contain a mixture of dwelling types at different densities. And so we do have that being proposed here so that we have a range of housing options. And we are protecting the environmentally sensitive lands in terms of the Bell Creek wetlands, not be developed, will be retained in their natural state. Next slide, please. We do, as Desta indicated, have majority of the lands are currently zoned as residential holding exception 1 and environment, and we are proposing development to occur in the lands that are currently zoned residential holding. Next slide, please. As Desta also indicated, we are proposing R4 and R5 zones for the lands that are to be developed, as well as environmental protection and open space zones. Next slide, please. So there were a number of reports that were prepared in support of the subdivision and rezoning applications. There was a planning justification report, an environmental impact study, servicing brief, flow monitoring report, preliminary water design, stormwater brief, traffic study, stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment, noise and vibration study, and a landscape/development concept. The archaeology study indicates that there are no archaeological resources that were found on the site and no further work is required. The noise and vibration study addresses the noise from the railway to the north, and some of the houses at the north end that would back onto the railway will need a warning clause and air conditioning similar to the Mercedes Meadows development townhouses. And then the landscape concept plan does show where street trees and walkways can be provided through this land. So again, we recognize the importance of walkways in this area, and we do want to work with staff to address those issues that have been raised. Next slide, please. So as indicated, an environmental impact study has been undertaken, which addresses the environmental features and functions of the property And we want to ensure that there's no negative impact on the provincially significant wetlands. So this map indicates where the different sort of ecological land use classifications occur on the site and some of the areas where some of the environmental studies were done. Next slide, please. So there were field studies that were carried out as part of this investigation. As noted on this slide, those took about 8 days of total field work time to do. Also, as part of the field work, the boundary of the provincially significant wetland was staked in the field with the staff of Quinte Conservation. So they have approved the location of the PSW, and as indicated, then the buffers will start beyond that boundary. And as part of the field work that was done, there were surveys for breeding birds, amphibians, vegetation, and species at risk. Next slide, please. So this is just a couple of pictures of the what the site looks like. So on the right-hand side, you can see the wetland areas, and on the left-hand side, you can see some of the cedar forest that exists on a portion of the property. Next slide, please. So as indicated, only a small portion of the property has development capabilities. It's about 25 acres out of the total of the property. No developments occurring within the provincially significant wetlands. What the provincial policies tell us is that development can occur on lands that are adjacent to a wetland, subject to the findings of the environmental impact study. And as I've indicated, we're providing for a 30-meter buffer to those wetlands. Next slide, please. So there were a number of conclusions that came out of the environmental impact study, the 30-meter buffer for the lots and 25 meters for the stormwater facility, that there has to be sediment fencing around the developable area during construction, that there be a stewardship homeowner's manual provided so that the residents that move in there are aware of the sensitivities of this property and the wetland that they are near to, and some of the things that they can do to help protect the wetland in the natural area. The provision of a low impact footpath within the buffer areas so that people stay out of the wetland itself. That tree cutting will only occur during sort of the fall, winter, and very early spring, so as to avoid impacts on breeding birds and their nesting. And that the outer walls of the stormwater management facility would be landscaped with native trees, shrubs, and ground cover that will enhance the wildlife habitat. Next slide, please. So from a servicing perspective, one of the things that we wanted to point out is that from the sanitary and water distribution systems perspective, the sewers and water main on Tessa Boulevard were oversized to accommodate development occurring on this property because these lands are designated as residential, and so there was an anticipation that development would occur here. Next slide, please. And in fact, if you look at the engineering drawings for both Spruce Gardens and Tessa Boulevard, the water main and the sanitary lines have been brought up right to the edge of the property line so that there is an ability to extend them. And the two cul-de-sacs that exist there now were intended to be temporary cul-de-sacs. So those cul-de-sacs will be removed when the road then is further extended. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we are providing for a stormwater management facility, which will be used to control the quality of stormwater that leaves the property. It will be a wet pond, so it will be something similar to what exists in the Mercedes Meadow subdivision immediately to the adjacent of it. We did hear some questions with respect to concerns about flooding and grading, and those will be addressed in more detail at the detailed engineering design if the subdivision is draft plan approved. And you know, obviously the city will ensure that the grading and the stormwater ensure that there is no flooding issues for any of the adjacent lands. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we also had a traffic study that was done for this. It went out and did some traffic counts. Right now, we recognize that those counts were done obviously during a pandemic, and so there was some factors taken into consideration in terms of doing that and looking at the traffic that is there today. Next slide, please. The traffic study then identified what trips would be generated by the subdivision. And when you're doing a traffic study, these trip generation rates are based on the kind of development that's being proposed, and it focuses on the morning and the afternoon rush hour. So it's a 1 hour period that's deemed to be the peak hour where the most traffic is going to occur. And so in this case, it was deemed to be 98 trips in the morning and 130 trips in the afternoon. And then the next slide, please. That then is combined with the traffic in the area to look at what traffic is going to occur on this site in the future. And they looked at the year 2029 for the total peak hour traffic and determined that it would continue to operate at a level of service A, which is essentially the sort of the lowest amount of delays when you get to an intersection. And that's similar to what exists today. We're not trying to say that there's not going to be more traffic on the road and that there's, obviously a change in terms of Tessa Boulevard isn't ending in a cul-de-sac in its current location. So we do recognize that there will be additional traffic, but our engineer is identifying for us that the traffic can be accommodated on these roads. And as I understand it, the transportation department at the city has indicated that they don't have any concerns identified at this point in time. So with that, I do want to say that, again, concluding remarks are that we're proposing to protect 68% of this property in its natural state, which is 59 acres, and to put it into public ownership. We want to work with the city in terms of making sure that the wetland is protected, that there are trails that are provided for in this property. The lands do have sensitivities, and we're very conscious of that, and do want to make sure that the wetland is protected for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Any questions from committee members? Mayor Panchuk.
Thank you, Councillor Carr, and thank you, Ms. Jones, for your presentation today. Just in terms of some background information for me, how long have your clients owned this property?
About 30 years.
30 years? 30.
Yes.
And so they've had a plan for subdivision for a number of times, because I know that they had to come to council for renewals on that. Now, my understanding, they sold the portion of the Hanley South area that is now under development?
Yes, they did.
And about how long ago did they sell that?
I would guess about 5 years ago, but I don't have the exact date. I apologize, Mr. Mayor.
And okay, and the reason why I'm asking those questions, I'm trying to understand why they're proceeding with this application at this time when they held the lands for a considerable period of time before that. So perhaps if you could find out and get that information into Mr. McDonald, that would be helpful. The second question I have, we've heard from a number of residents regarding the number of vehicles. So what are you estimating with 156 units, if that's my math is right? How many vehicles will that generate for people in that neighborhood?
I'm happy to answer this question. I also have the traffic consultant here. Do you want me to answer that question, or would you rather hear from him?
Well, I'm just looking for what you used as an assumption of how many vehicles would be for these 156 units.
So as I indicated, when you're doing a traffic study, you are not looking at the total number of trips generated in a day. What you're doing is looking at the total number of trips that are generated in the peak hour. And so in the morning, they're estimating 98 trips during that peak hour, and in the afternoon, it would be 130. We recognize that there are more units than that, but not everybody leaves for work or school or wherever their destination is for the day at exactly the same time. And so that's usually spread out over a several hour period sort of thing. So the numbers that we're talking about are that sort of worst case hour, not the total number of trips that are being generated.
But I think as we are trying to determine the credibility of those reports, I think it's 128 trips a day that is being considered for 156 units. So even if we said that 75% of those units would have a vehicle, leaving once a day would be 2 trips. And so when I look at 120, it's hard. That's why I wanted to ask that question. The the concerns that were raised with respect to the fact that they would only be able to use on the south part of this development, the Tessa Boulevard. Have you considered an additional exit besides Tessa for that area?
We certainly did, Mr. Mayor. We looked at the possible extension of Victoria Avenue into the subdivision, but the Conservation Authority had concerns with extending Victoria across the wetland in that location, and so we did not propose it.
Were there concerns that it was impossible to do, or that it would be significantly more expensive?
From the Conservation Authority's perspective, I wasn't aware that they were concerned about what it would cost to the developer to develop it, sort of thing. They were looking at it, as I understand it, from an environmental perspective and feeling that it was better not to cross the wetland in that location.
And if we determined that we were concerned about the traffic, particularly at what would be rerouted to Tessa Boulevard, is your client willing to consider dealing with the Victoria Avenue extension?
Oh, we're certainly willing to consider it. As I tried to indicate when I finished my presentation, we definitely want to work with staff and with City Council to, try and come to a development proposal that people are comfortable with.
Okay. And the last series of questions I have is on the green space that is provincially identified. You had made a comment, and I'd like just to clarify that your client was willing to provide that remaining green space to the city or to a conservation authority. Am I correct in that? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, you are.
So the question I would have is, looking at the site plans, how would residents and people in that part of the city be able to access that?
Well, through the road systems and the walkways. So the subdivision that's being proposed does have like 30-meter buffers around the edge of those lots. So there's certainly an opportunity to have walkways within the buffer area going around the development, and to have possible connections to the walkways that are proposed on the lands to the south.
So, Ms. Jones, I'm looking at the proposed plan of subdivision, which had the orange and the brown and the yellow layouts. And so you're suggesting that at the entrance to this new area, there would be a walkway there going, I'm assuming, north into those areas. So that would be on the west side, and I guess on the east side of the property, the only space I see would be leading into the stormwater pond. I don't understand where there would be access on that side to the green space.
I apologize if it doesn't come through clearly on the plan that was colored, but there is, as I indicated, a 30-meter buffer between development and the wetland, and where it's not butting up to where the development, so there's townhouses at the northern portion of the townhouses that are proposed do not abut wetland. So recognizing that there wasn't sort of any kind of opportunity there for walking trail, we had shown a space between the edge of the property and the edge of the lots so that there could be an opportunity for the walking trail. So as you come off of where Tessa Boulevard ends now and into this property, right now there is a trail that people use that comes along the western property boundary. And so that sort of trail location could be maintained until you get to then what is the wetland area and the wetland buffer. And then the walkway could be located within that wetland buffer area. So the Conservation Authority, and I'm not trying to put words into their mouth, based on previous discussions with them, if it is a low impact kind of walkway that's located in a wetland buffer area that's sort of close to the lots themselves as opposed to being close to the wetland. So we're talking about 30 meters or 100 feet here, that generally speaking, they have accepted that kind of a walkway location in the past.
Okay. Well, if on a further or a subsequent visit to us on this proposal, You may want to take a little look at that in terms of the how the green space would actually function for residents. Also, the issue of traffic and the increased number of vehicles that will be using Tessa Boulevard. You know, those are I know there are a number of concerns, and we will hear about it in a little while, but those I think are some you know, fundamental questions that have to be addressed on dealing with it. But I thank you for your time, and thank you, Councillor Carr, for letting me ask those questions.
Yep, thank you. Any other questions from committee members? No? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to work through this list, and first one up is Michael Kroll. Michael Kroll, you are in the meeting and you have the floor.
Hi, thanks. So I won't take too much of your time. Thanks for letting me speak tonight. So my family and I are very much opposed to the idea of developing the area in question. We've lived here in this area for about 8 years now. And along with many other families with young children, we have grown quite fond of the natural beauty of the woods and wetland area that exists here now. We believe that there are many other much more suitable areas that could or should be developed long before this wetland area. This area is home to a wide variety of animal species, including birds, beavers, various woodland creatures, including some endangered species. This development would simply destroy that natural habitat for these animals. That alone, plus 8 or 9 years of construction, are going to displace many of these creatures. Besides the animals, of course, many families enjoy these well-established trail systems in these woods. We have noticed a lot more families using this space over the years, especially during this last year, far more than the 156 families that would live in the new proposed development. It's a wonderful space right now that provides a bit of nature within our city, and this development would simply destroy that. In terms of other plots of lands to develop, I wonder why the city or developers would clear cut all of the land on the south side of Station Street between Hague and Herkimer. It seems that they're ready to develop that. That seems like a much more appropriate parcel of land than this woodland area. I don't think it's a good idea to clear cut more land when all of that land is currently kind of ready for development. And finally, I wonder if any of our city councilors think this is a good idea. Have any of our city representatives visited these woods and trails found on this parcel of land? Do any of our councilors right now think this is a good idea to clear cut this precious wetland area for the sake of 156 houses? This is simply not a good idea. And with that, I'll say thank you and good evening.
Thank you. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Thank you very much. Next one is Gary McGeechee or Jerry McGeechee. Okay, and then there's a Nancy McGeechee as well. Okay, good evening. You have the floor.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank
you. I have a PowerPoint slide deck that's been provided, and I don't know if other people can see that at this point, but I can. It's only 5 slides, and I was told the IT department was going to load it up.
It's coming up here now.
Thank you. Okay, I'll be quick. You could turn it into the slideshow mode, please, if you don't mind. Thank you. I'll be very quick. I echo a number of concerns that I've seen circulating through the community in anticipation of this meeting. I'm going to focus only on one issue, though, so that you're not hearing things again and again. I have the same concerns generally about the traffic the environment, potential for flooding, overall municipal planning, and how this will affect our city. But my focus will be on safety. I did take a couple of notes though, in listening to the initial presentation tonight that I wanted to add. And one was that there was a comment made today by the representative of the developer that they will be working with staff regarding additional construction access. This was raised in the developer meeting about a week ago, and it seems to be pitched as somehow a benefit to the community. I ask council and the planning committee to be very cautious about this. My last slide will address what I suspect, without telling you all up front and without putting it into the material, they plan to take away some parkland that's not even on the current plan. And I'll get to that near the end. As well, I note that the slide deck that was shown earlier from the developer's representative has a comment on there that they're striving for no negative impacts on the provincially significant wetlands. If you look carefully at their environmental impact study, it recognizes that, and this is my reading of it, that there will be necessarily some negative impacts without getting into what those impacts will be. So those things are, they don't line up. And so you should be cautious and pay great attention to what's being served to you. My focus is on traffic, on safety. If we could go to the next slide, please. Very quickly, I want to focus on our proximity to the rail. And this issue is the only thing I really want to talk about, but nobody plans for railway disasters. Nobody thinks they're going to happen. And when they do happen, people look back and they say, how did all those people get hurt? How did they die? How did it happen? And if we could go to the next slide, there have been 431 federal train safety investigations since 1990 on the rail safety database that's available online. I just want to remind everyone that nobody thinks these things are going to happen. But what we're having recommended now, if we could go to the next slide, is that there should be 156 houses leaving one exit within a couple of 100 meters of the rail line. And that rail line, I've looked at the tanks and there's a lot of chemical names on those tanks. And so if I could ask you to please hit play on this video, and you're gonna have to share the sound. I discussed this with, at the bottom of your, the little image there, you'll see a play header pop up. No, on the video, right there. Yeah. I hope people can hear the sound of this. Did you? It might be a technical issue, but
our IT folk is.
That's fine. I'll move on. But what you would have seen there is a video with people talking about how quick, how surprising, and how devastating Lac Mégantic was. It was completely unexpected. And what you're being asked to do is put 156 houses on one two-lane street, one lane in, one lane out. And there's this talk of this emergency route through the stormwater retention facility. Who at 2 a.m, when some sort of alarm goes off and the sirens start, is going to remember or know how to go and drive down that secondary exit? People are going to want to get out. They're going to all want to get out past all the houses on Tessa at the same time as the houses on Tessa and Mercedes are all trying to get out these streets. People are going to look back if that happens and say, how on earth did people agree to put 156 houses with no access to an arterial road? There's nothing like this in Belleville. And I don't have I've asked the Planning and Engineering Committee for numbers, but they're looking into it and they're being very helpful. As far as I can tell, Sarah Court has something like 75 residences, but it exits onto College on an arterial road. Kawartha Court has about 51. It's a long street. There's a lot of houses and there's a court off of it, but there's only 51. You want to put they want to put 156, and they want it to spill into another series of residential streets, which themselves only have two exits. So I want to stress as strongly as I can that we can't predict a disaster. We just should not modify the rules and amend laws and allow people to develop things and amend the rules to allow people to generate an unsafe situation. If you could go to the next slide, this is my last point and I'll be quick. It relates to the potential use of the stormwater retention facility that is just south of Tessa. It's on the little screenshot of the city's own park finder. At the far right, you see a green area, and you can probably recognize that area. It's the Bell Creek marsh and everything. It spills out towards where it's proposed to be developed. The rumor is, based upon what people have seen from the developer, is that they somehow have come to the belief that they will be allowed to take away that existing parkland and drive dump trucks, contractor trucks, and whatever else through there for the next 9 or so years, removing and like taking away existing parkland. People skate in those stormwater ponds. People walk around there, and it may not be the most beautiful parkland, but it's all we've got in that area. Just to the west of it is the marsh area, and the city, with the greatest of respect, really didn't build much of the humanity into that area because it's all marsh. It's lovely, but there's no real way to enjoy it as a person other than to walk around it or to look at it. So when you see that big green area there, it's really not human usable land for the large part. There are really not many green spaces in the east end of Belleville. We have a wonderful opportunity here with many people wanting to move to our city. It is at currently not a very developed city, and people love the proximity to wilderness and the outdoors. We have a chance here to build with great planning, enjoy the outdoors, and build a community that has the outdoors at its footsteps, and that we can all be proud of. So that's really all I wanted to say, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Just before you go, there's a Nancy McGeechee listed as well.
Yeah, Nancy was, we registered together, and then they sent back the opportunity for us both to speak, and we just decided that I would speak, although Nancy would probably have said things better.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Just wanted to be sure here as I go down my list. Thank you. So the next
She's right
one
here, by the way, too.
Okay, thank you. The next individual is Alex Cole. Okay, Alex Cole, you are in the meeting. If you want to unmute your microphone, and if you have video, you can activate that as well. The floor is yours.
Sure. Let me just, I can turn my camera on. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'd like to first thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I understand there's a lot of other people there anxiously waiting to speak, so I'll keep my statement as brief as possible here. I guess for starters, my name is Alex Cole. I'm a resident here on Victoria Avenue at the dead end side on the east side of Hague Road. I am a transportation and highway designer with over 11 years of experience in the engineering consulting industry, with particular expertise in the fields of drainage and hydrology, transportation design, municipal design, and of course, land development, which is where I started my career. I'd like to highlight just a few concerns. Now, a number of them have already been brought up, but I just want to bring up a few that haven't been brought up. With respect to the environment, the proposed development as identified in the environmental impact statement would negatively impact the environment through the loss of animal habitat, displacement of local wildlife, and by discharging stormwater runoff into the receiving Bell Creek system. Of most concern to me is that this 30-meter setback from the PSW being proposed kind of contradicts or violates what OREG 319/09 states, that no person shall undertake development in or on the areas within the jurisdiction of the authority that are areas where development could interfere with the hydrologic function of a wetland, including areas within 120 meters of all PSWs and wetlands that are greater than 2 hectares in size. So that's basically what we have on this site, a wetland that's greater than 2 hectares. For whatever reason, they've been granted that permission, it seems. When I was reading through the EIS, they had some correspondence or comments with the conservation. It seems like they've allowed them the 30 meters, which in my opinion, I mean, that development will interfere with the hydrologic function of the wetland. So that's worth noting. With respect to the stormwater management, I understand there's a preliminary report that's prepared. I'm not questioning the validity of that report, but I will highlight that it really speaks to just providing traditional stormwater quantity and quality control measures using guidelines that are very outdated, that the MECP, the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks Agency, has in place. So in particular, they're just proposing to remove suspended solids for the runoff for the south portion of the development. While this is still acceptable industry practice, there are other conservation authorities, such as the one in Toronto there, that have some low impact development measures that, in my opinion, should be considered by the city and the conservation, as they're more progressive than what the MECP proposes with just removing suspended solids. Suspended solids don't necessarily mean you've actually treated runoff. It just means you've removed sediment. So this development with the runoff, the increase in flows, pollutants, that sort of thing, it will have a detrimental effect on the watershed. That pretty much sums up what I have to say here. I just want to finish with closing remark about the draft plan. The density seems very high for the Belleville area. Doesn't seem to really match the built form of the neighboring developments that have been constructed. Now I understand where I am in Victoria Avenue, it was constructed a long time ago, so the lots are much bigger. But even through Tessa Boulevard, the ones that are there are still bigger than the small singles that they're proposing, which are more inclined to something you'd see in a major center such as Scarborough. But lastly, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Thank you again. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Next presenter is Christopher Spencer. Okay, Christopher Spencer, you are in the meeting. If you want to unmute your microphone, and if you have video or want video, you can activate that as well. And I have a note here that you also have a slide presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. This is the first slide. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Would you hold the slide there, please? In deference to the planners and owners, I've carefully read through all 10 reports supporting the application for the proposed Hanley Park North development and listened to their presentation on February 23rd. For my part, I walked and photographed on the trails and marshes in all seasons and all weathers for 37 years. My focus is the environmental impact study. The basic conclusion of the impact study is that with the appropriate mitigation strategies, 30-meter setback, stormwater treatment facility, fencing, etc., the impact on the provincially significant wetlands will be minimal but acceptable. I do not agree with this conclusion, and here are my reasons. In this first slide, the proposed emergency access road runs right next to the wetland. Upgrading and maintaining it will encroach on the wetland. Salt and sand from snow clearing will end up in the swamp, as indicated by the green arrow. Next slide, please. With the current plan, there will be about 100 backyards exposed to the wetlands. The runoff from fertilizers, insecticides, sump pumps, and poorly packed recycling boxes, which we see a lot of around here, will certainly cause degradation over time. The proximity to the PSW means deer flies and mosquitoes are going to plague the homeowners. Many will fight back with insecticides, which will end up in the wetland. Third, to preserve a viable, biologically diverse marsh complex, there must be beavers. Since they are an important part of the PSW, killing them or breaking their dams constitutes a very obvious negative impact. Next slide, please. Yet in the past 2 years, 2 beaver dams down in the lower 2 in the provincially significant wetland caused upstream flooding in the Hanley Park development lands, indicated by the lower 2 blue arrows. And those 2 dams have been broken apart. Besides impacting the beavers and all the creatures that live in their ponds, these actions have artificially lowered the wetland boundary. Meanwhile, the beavers have relocated and have built a new dam that is now starting to flood another portion of the proposed development. In light of this information, it behooves the city to insist on a substantially greater setback than 30 meters, especially in the south and southeast sections. Doing so may allow a sufficient habitat to support the beavers. It may also help protect against that 100-year extreme weather event we've come to learn to expect. Next slide, please. Moving on. This summertime view displays the ecological land classification zones. I strongly disagree with the description of FOMM 5-2. The caption reads, dry, fresh poplar, white cedar mixed forest. And the description in the text states, dominant trees in the canopy include trembling aspen, large tooth aspen, and eastern white cedar along with scattered hardwoods such as sugar maple, hophorn, beam, basswood, and white elm. This description completely obscures the reality. Next slide. This early fall aerial view reveals the area's true nature. All the orange yellow tops are giant sugar maples. These are the dominant trees. And there are more than 40 of them. Next slide, please. This slide is meant to convey some idea of how large and majestic these maples are. And I would like to notice that in the presentation we had earlier, no pictures of these trees were introduced. Many of these trees are over 100 feet tall and 150 to 200 years old. They were never cut because maple sap was at one time harvested yearly in this area. No amount of landscape tree planting will mitigate their loss. Next slide, please. But it's not just the trees. The flowers, beds of trilliums and yellow trout lilies, spring beauties, etc., plus the existence of puffballs indicate a thriving ancient ecosystem existing in and on the forest floor. The correct label for this area is Carolinian old growth forest. A third-party consultant should verify this and evaluate this section's true significance with a view to preserving it in its entirety. Next slide, please. To sum up, this development proposal as it stands will adversely affect the provincially significant wetlands, will leave areas prone to flooding, will eliminate a rare section of old growth forest, and should be rejected. Thank you for your time.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Mayor Panchuk.
Hi, thank you very much, Mr. Spencer, and I have to agree with you. You mentioned you've been walking in this area for, I think you said 37 years. Was I correct in hearing that?
You were.
Where do you live now?
I'm on the end of, halfway down the dead end section of Victoria.
Victoria. And so that's where you've lived for the past 37 years?
Yes.
Okay. How would you feel about they're using Victoria as a secondary access to that neighborhood?
That would be a loaded question. You know the answer.
I know, but I want to get it on the record.
On the record, I would object to it strenuously.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Thank you, Mr. Spencer, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ray and Judy Muldoon. So Ray Muldoon, you are in the meeting. If you want to unmute your microphone, and if you have video, you can activate that as well. And you have the floor.
Okay. Well, good evening. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to this very important matter. We have a prepared kind of statement, if you're okay with that. We'll be we'll go through it as quickly as we can.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, so over the past several weeks, we have witnessed an outpouring of concern across Belleville and beyond as news of this proposed project that will devastate one of the last remaining green spaces in Belleville. There are a number of significant concerns resulting in the impact of this development, including the loss of significant local area forest, as spoken to, the negative impact that this project will have on the local environment, and the major increase in local area traffic from proposed single-use entry and exit that will flow directly down secondary residential streets and neighborhoods. It's the matter of the impact of traffic flow on the nearby neighborhoods that I'd like to emphasize tonight. The traffic impact study that was completed by Howell Penny Associates in November contains, in our opinion, a number of inaccuracies and numerous very questionable assumptions. On page 7 of this report, it states that the submission will have access it states that the subdivision will have access to Hague Road by 2 access points. This is very misleading due to the fact that the proposed 6-home portion of the development in the north will flow its traffic down Spruce Gardens, but the remaining 150 homes will flow all of its traffic down the single point of access at Tessa Boulevard. In our research of this presentation, we could not locate another neighborhood in Belleville that flowed traffic from 150 homes through 1 access point. The consultant's report, purchased by Macaulay, Shihomey, and Housen on behalf of the property owners, also offers an emergency access route, as you've heard, through the subdivision via an existing pedestrian trail on the stormwater pond property immediately south of Tessa and adjacent to 10 homes. This stormwater property is currently considered parkland, as has been noted, by the City of Belleville, and was approved as a required park space for Mercedes Meadows by the builder, Hilden Homes. The homes on the south side of Tessa Boulevard were all purchased with an additional premiums of around $20,000 to $50,000 to access parkland behind their homes, with the assurance that this land would remain as stormwater pond green space and not as a road for emergency and or other vehicles. In a recent Zoom presentation, Macaulay, Shihomey, and Housen representatives indicated that their traffic management strategy also indicated a plan to flow construction vehicles down this trail behind the homes on Tessa Boulevard. This would require the widening and paving of this trail to a minimum of 6 meters, their numbers, more than twice its current size. Not only would this result in all heavy construction vehicles passing daily by the backyards of Tessa Boulevard residents during the construction period of 8 to 10 years, but it would also result in a paved road being constructed within 5 feet of the existing backyards on Tessa. In our view, this represents an unreasonable and long-term hardship to the landowners in that area, and indeed to all residents of Mercedes Meadow. Another issue with the traffic impact study is the predicted traffic flow counts, or trips. And this was stated earlier. This report states that the daily traffic trips from single home residences would be 75 in the morning and 25 in the morning as well. From the townhouses, this appears to have a faulty assumption, because there's no evidence that we can see that the townhouses currently in our subdivision along Spruce Meadows have less vehicles than a single family homes in the area, and certainly do not generate 2/3 less traffic than their adjacent homes. Further, the study proposes a 5% reduction in traffic to the local transit usage by residents. One look at the site map makes it very clear that the local transit routes are not easily accessible from the site, and therefore the vast majority of residents will use their vehicles daily for commuting to work or school. The traffic impact study observes that its traffic flow patterns were not taken from Belleville or adjacent urban areas, but from the town of Elmont near Ottawa, a community of 5,000 residents. The study argues that an adjustment of 5% to compensate for low traffic numbers observed in Elmont during the COVID study period would provide reasonable estimates of traffic flow for the new subdivision. Canadian estimates of traffic flow for the new, Canadian statistics from 2020 indicate a range of 30 to 70% reduction in traffic patterns in urban areas due to COVID. An adjustment of 5% to compensate for this reduction is ridiculous and only serves to develop traffic flow numbers for the proposed site that might appear reasonable. There is no existing evidence in this report that was adjusted for increased construction traffic over 8 to 10 year period. Our estimates based on a post-COVID increase of 35% in traffic flow, which is lower than the Canadian study, and an estimate of 1.5 vehicles per residence, another Canadian study of 2019, which showed daily traffic during the week at approximately 298 vehicles per day and 190 on the weekend. All of this traffic would enter and exit at Tessa Boulevard and then flow up Tessa or Mercedes Boulevards. The Belleville official plan references the need for medium density housing areas to access primary or high flow roads, not secondary residential roads. It seems reasonable to conclude then that the proposed medium density subdivision should be accessed by high flow primary traffic routes and directed away from the local secondary roads such as Tessa, Mercedes, and Spruce Gardens Boulevard. The proposed plan proposes the opposite. In our view, this represents a complete unrealistic manner to manage traffic associated with the addition of approximately 234 additional vehicles to the area. That's the 1.5 per vehicle or per vehicle per home study. To conclude, it's our submission that this proposed subdivision plan for the Hanley North property presents a substantial risk to the safety of children and residents in Mercedes Meadow and the surrounding area by the increased unreasonable traffic volume and construction traffic. It also ignores many of the substantial risks to the environment and local wildlife. It presents major pollution issues, including noise pollution and emissions from construction vehicles and traffic, and it compromises the long-term well-being of local families and their children. It is our opinion that any plan for residential development on this land is not reasonable or responsible and is not in keeping with a vision of sustainable green space that exists in harmony with the future responsible growth of our city. Judy.
In the 5 years since we decided to move back to our hometown and have lived in this neighborhood, the mixed forest and the sensitive Bell Creek wetlands surrounding us has provided endless hours of beauty, enjoyment, and learning through the plants and wildlife it provides. It is a mixed forest with many very old trees which filter water, protect our area during flooding, and provides habitat for a wide variety of flora and fauna. 1 hectare of trees provides the oxygen for 18 people. The proposed development is over 11 hectares. We have recorded, not in 8 days, but over our 5 years, so far over 70 birds that either reside within, frequent, or use this forest in traveling through. It includes endangered species, large and small birds. There are carpets of trilliums, dogtooth violets, and many other wildflowers, as well as mosses, fungi, and water plants. There are reptiles and amphibians like snakes, variety of frogs, salamanders, and threatened snapping turtles. There are mammals large and small like deer, red fox, coyote, beaver, bats, and many more. A wide variety of insects, including butterflies, dragonflies, bees. What the construction doesn't kill will have their habitat completely destroyed or negatively impacted, including in the provincially protected wetlands and existing pond. The clear cutting of the forest north and south of us already has exponentially increased the noise pollution from the trains and traffic. and has already impacted negatively the numbers of flora and fauna we see. The lack of green space, and especially natural green space in the east end of Belleville for hundreds of families, is a sad reality. Science has proven the connection to nature is an essential part of health and well-being. Generations of our children are growing up with only concrete pavement and a sea of houses surrounding them. This proposed development will destroy the last green space left in our city and threaten the humans, the wildlife, and plants whose environment this area encompasses. After 10 years of construction and all the heavy traffic, pollution, noise, dust, and dirt that it brings, the Mercedes Meadows residents will be expected to endure another 8 to 10 years of the same. The increased traffic from this single exit and the construction easement emergency section exit through the pond area will render the front and backyards of the existing costly premium lots on Tessa Boulevard unlivable and make the other streets of our neighborhood unsafe and ruin the pond. The development will essentially destroy the safety and livability of one neighborhood to create another one in an environmentally sensitive area. As elected members and public employees, it is your duty to first protect the safety and well-being of your existing residents and to be honorable stewards of the lands in your jurisdiction. This development should never happen. The present owner of the property has no stake in our community except to profit from it and move on. Your trail and parkland along the waterfront and the Moira River are legacies to be proud of. We, your present and future residents, believe you can find a way to preserve this treasured forest in the eastern area from development now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions or comments from committee members? No, I don't see any. Okay, thank you again. The next individual is Ada Mallory.
They heard this before. Your excuse, well done. No, you did a great job. Got it?
Is Ada Mallory there? If you are, could you just raise your hand in the meeting? It'll be a little easier for our IT to find you in the long list of participants. Okay, we don't see Ada Mallory. If you are in there at some point, if you can raise your hand electronically, we'll move on to Sao Hu. I apologize if I pronounce that incorrectly. You have the floor. You want to activate your microphone, Sao Hu.
Hello.
Yes, you have audio and you have the floor.
I didn't expect that I have to speak. I don't have too much to add on. And then this is the last piece of green space in east end of Bella. I uploaded a lot of picture to Facebook today and showing all the animals, birds living there. Yeah, so it's a huge mistake if we City Belleville to approve this rezoning. That's pretty much for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Thank you again. Next participant we have is Bill Mahar. Okay, Bill Mahar, you are in the meeting. If you want to activate your microphone, and if you have video, you can do that as well, and you have the floor. Bill Mahar, you're in the meeting. If you want to activate your microphone, it's currently on mute. Okay, Bill Mahar, I'm going to ask one last time. If you could unmute your microphone. You are in the meeting right now. It'll be on your bottom left of your screen. Okay, I'm going to make a note, Mr. Mahar, and we'll try to get you back in the meeting. I'm going to move on down my list here. Janet Fraser is the next one. If Janet Fraser's in the meeting, could you raise your hand electronically? You don't see her either. Okay, I'll make a note. Moving on, Larry Golden. Mr. Golden, you are in the meeting.
Yes, hello, thank you. Committee, council members, other attendees, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I won't take too much time because I think there's been some superb speakers before me. You've heard quite a bit from some people who seem to be experts in the field, so I will add my name as opposing this development, but I don't think I have the capacity to talk about the environmental impacts, except to say that I might ask this committee to seek a new and independent environmental assessment. The MSH report relied on dated environmental data from previous studies that may not reflect today's reality, and I think you've got a bit of a taste of how the people around here feel. I could also ask the committee and council to consider the Environmental Commission of Ontario 2018 Environmental Protection Report. On page 14 of that report, one section addressed the negative impact. Even a project that claims to avoid complete destruction of a green space can, and I quote, still degrade wetland function when construction encroaches on the edges of the wetland habitat or alters hydrological patterns, end quote. The repercussions of building in this protected area should be seriously reconsidered. And that's all I really want to say at this point. I'll kept it brief for your sake. So thank you very much for your time.
And we all appreciate that. Thank you very much. And your comments are certainly registered. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Thanks again for your comments. Moving on in the list, Erica Groves. Ms. Groves, you're in the meeting. If you'd like to unmute your microphone, and if you have video, you can activate that, and you have the floor.
Hi.
Hi there. You have the floor.
I didn't think I was actually signed up to speak. I was just listening. I was gonna maybe email some questions after, but I just echo what everyone said about the environment. I understand that there's a housing shortage in Belleville and that we are one of the fastest growing cities in Canada right now, and that people will need somewhere to live. But I just am wondering, at what point do we stop developing and let nature be? I mean, humans have always thought that we are the superior species, but we're a part of nature. So at some point we have to stop like bulldozing through their houses, you know what I mean? Like, and stop destroying where they live, because wetlands especially are such an important part of our healthy lifestyle too. So I was just asking and wondering what the councilors' thoughts were on, and where your vision was for the environment in Belleville as we become a more developed city. And just looking forward to seeing what everyone has to say about that. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Any questions from committee members? So just so you're aware, Ms. Groves, tonight we're just going through the introduction of the application. There'll be lots of analysis and there might be some discussion later on in the meeting as well. And you're certainly welcome to reach out to any council member and email any questions you may have.
Okay.
So if I don't see any questions, thank you again for your comments.
Thank you.
And moving on in the list, I have John Port. Mr. Port, you have joined the meeting. If you would activate your microphone, and if you have video, you're welcome to do that as well. And you have the floor. Mr. Port, you are in the meeting. There you are.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to speak, and most of the topics that I wanted to address have already been addressed. But one of the topics might have a concern with is with regards to the amount of fill that will be required to be brought into the new subdivision. It was brought up earlier that it would be a good idea if, you know, the committee members actually walk the area. And in doing so, you would probably notice the first thing you do when you come to the end of Tessa Boulevard is that there's probably a 6 to 10 foot drop there. That will have to be brought up to at least the same level as the Tessa Boulevard. And in doing so, that's going to be brought in by fill. That fill is adjacent to the actual, you know, wetlands and Bell Creek, and in doing so, I think you're going to have, you know, sediment and runoff and that sort of thing. So that's about the only thing that I wanted to address that hasn't already been spoke to. So,
okay, thank you for your comments. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Okay, thanks again for your comments.
Thank you.
The next individual I have listed is Nicole Lesage. Okay, we also have a Nicole Zanette. Okay, yeah. Okay, I have Nicole and Mike listed here. You're in the meeting if you'd like to deactivate your microphone.
Hi, everybody. All right, fun night for all, I'm sure. Okay, so as stated, my name is Nicole Lesage, and I live on Tessa Boulevard with my husband, Mike, and my 7-year-old son, Luca. And I really do appreciate this opportunity to quickly voice my concerns around the proposed development and wanted just to make sure that they were on public record. So in addition to concerns around the single entrance and environmental impact, my concerns are as followed. Number one, I have concerns with the proposed zoning, particularly in regards to limits of the number of proposed dwellings and their location. Based on what I've looked at, it looks like the zoning being asked for could permit a higher density than the originally proposed 156 dwellings. So the area is zoned R4 and it's proposed to be detached dwellings, but R4 zone can also allow for higher density uses such as semis, duplexes, and triplexes. If those uses are permitted, the dwelling count for this area could increase, thereby further calling into question the legitimacy of both the traffic and the environmental study. My final concern, based on the excellent speaking of some of my fellow community members, is the concern with the proposed emergency access road that's being considered. While addressed, I question how, if indeed a single entrance is adequate, as stated in the traffic study, why the service road is even on the table. The service road highlights the need for an additional entrance and should therefore be accommodated in the plans of development at their cost. So I believe that to conclude, I believe that using a public park and open space land to serve a private development seems completely inappropriate. So based on my concerns that have not been adequately addressed in the application put forth by the Hanley Park North subdivision, my family and I cannot support it as proposed. And I really encourage the council not to support this development at this time as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Thanks again for your comments.
Thanks.
I have Richard Floyd listed next. Okay, go ahead. Okay, I have a Richard and a Vivian, probably a couple different access points, but you're in the meeting if you'd like to activate your microphone. And you have the floor. Good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, Director McDonald, ladies and gentlemen. My wife and I built a house in Mercedes Meadows on Tessa Boulevard in 2012. Our home is on the west side of Tessa Boulevard that borders on the path that leads to the water management pond. That area is currently designated as parkland. The proposed Hanley Park subdivision is based on the city of Belleville allowing development of this pathway park to provide for an emergency entrance to the new subdivision. In fact, the developers' retained experts said during an online information session on February 23rd that they would consider using that expanded road for their construction vehicles when building this subdivision. If approved, the road will be expanded to allow for a 26-foot emergency exit. This will bring the road within 5 feet of our fence and property and will most definitely impact drainage around the swale on all of the properties on this side of the road. I don't understand why the city would allow a subdivision to be built if the developer can't provide a secondary or an emergency access road for the project without relying on the city to facilitate it with its own land. The city of Belleville approved the Mercedes Meadows subdivision without requiring the developer to provide any green space or park area. Mercedes Meadows residents therefore rely on this nearby parkland. The area remains environmentally sensitive, and there is already a high risk of flooding, as you know, from the complaints from the residents of Oak Ridge Boulevard. That issue resulted in the removal of the beavers at the dam on Hague Road last year. The city of Belleville therefore recognized that flooding is a serious concern in this area. It will only be worsened with this expansion. And as for roads and access, the traffic study used for the Hanley Park subdivision application appears to be flawed. It examined the impact of additional cars on Tessa Boulevard. However, the survey was conducted in November during COVID conditions, and one cannot seriously believe that this study is a valid representation of regular use traffic. Many people have been working and studying from home for over a year now. Page 10 of the traffic impact study uses the town of Elmont, which has a population of 5,000 people, to determine the impact on traffic from the COVID-19 outbreak. However, the population differences and related traffic volume differences make that comparison obviously invalid. If the Hanley Park subdivision is approved, the real traffic volume on the street and others nearby will be substantially higher than what is alleged by the developer, and it will constitute a great strain on the local infrastructure. There will be safety concerns with substantially more vehicles using the street, which would be the only entrance to the new subdivision. Surely this would be unwise and frankly dangerous in an emergency situation or otherwise. The Bell Creek Swamp Wetland Complex is located in the land parcel in question. It's designated as a provincially significant area. The reports from the developers say there is no development proposed within that area, and they will construct a 30-meter buffer and a 25-meter buffer. At page 40 of the environmental impact study, it confirms that this is a provincially significant wetland. It scores 718 points when anything over 600 points qualifies. At page 51 of the environmental impact study, it confirms that provincial policies that apply to the subject application include assurances that no development and site alteration will occur in the provincially significant wetland. The policy states that development and site alteration may be permitted on adjacent lands, provided the ecological functions of these features are evaluated and it's demonstrated that there will be no negative impacts on the features or their functions. However, the submitted reports confirm that there will indeed be negative impacts caused by the development. Again, the environmental impact study states at page 45, development adjacent to the provincially significant wetland might not be in complete compliance with the provincial policies and the no negative impacts on significant wetland features. However, we are of the view that it is not possible to construct and utilize the proposed development while at the same time having no impacts on some features of the provincially significant wetland. In short, impacts on the provincial significant wetland and its functions will be unavoidable, end quote. The developer, through its own retained experts, admits that it is not possible to comply with Ontario regulations and Conservation Authority regulations to protect this provincially significant area. The City of Belleville cannot, therefore, in good conscience, support such a development. As a local homeowner in Belleville, although I recognize that the land in question is privately owned, I strongly object to the wetland destruction and the extreme loss of related green space through access road expansion that this project will cause. I cannot imagine that it would be a socially and environmentally sound decision for the city to allow such expansion. The proposed Hanley Park subdivision is a flawed concept, and it is not in the best interest of the City of Belleville, its inhabitants, or its long-term development plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Thank you again. Have a good evening.
And you.
I have Bill Shepherd next. Just bear with us a moment. Mr. Shepherd, you are in the meeting. If you'd like to activate your microphone, and you have the floor. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity of speaking with you this night, and I appreciate the patience you've had listening to the various participants. My name is Bill Shepherd. I live at 36 Bevan Drive in Belleville, and I'm 8 kilometers from the subject property, but I'm interested as an environmentalist and a conservationist, and I am speaking against the Hanley North development. I believe any loss of green space, woodland, and marsh will be a detriment to the well-being of your area residents. And that's what I'll be speaking about tonight, is the well-being and health and care of your local residents. And with respect to the property, I think it's interesting to note that you're losing 34% of a very unique and special property. Now, by way of a little bit of background, if I could give this a little bit of context, I've lived in about 7 communities in the province of Ontario, from Northern Ontario to Georgetown, Ajax, now Belleville. Professionally, I worked in the nonprofit housing sector for many years, including senior citizen housing, children's daycare centers. And for 30 years of my profession, I worked with realtor organizations at the national and provincial level. And while I was with those realtor organizations, we developed what was called a quality of life for the province of Ontario. And part of that was green space and the ability to utilize green space. And finally, by way of context, I have hiked in every province of Canada, in Australia, New Zealand, in Europe, and in 22 states in the US. And so I have an appreciation. So what I'm going to share with you this evening briefly is scientific data, scientific reports that talks about the well-being and care of your residents. So for instance, the American Association for the Advancement of Science made comments with respect to nature and mental health. They said that there's evidence that supports that there's an association between nature experience and psychological well-being. Harvard Medical School did an article and a study on mood disorders can be lifted by spending time in nature. And they specifically, in the Harvard University study, spoke about reduced stress, reduction of depression and anxiety, increased general mental health, attention recovery, enhanced healing, enhanced productivity, enhanced physical well-being, reduce crime, reduce stress, and improve sleep. A professor from the University of Illinois in urban planning was joined by the director of therapeutic landscapes on the effect of green space and woodlands on humans. And they included that the improvements for adults would be positive effects for Alzheimer's, cognition, depression, general health, obesity, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and well-being. For children, they said it would, greenland space, woodlands, would positively impact ADHD, autism, cognition, depression, nature deficit disorder, obesity, stress, type 2 diabetes, and their general well-being. You may not know this, but the BC doctors now are allowed to prescribe nature and time in nature to boost patient health. And this is supported by British Columbia Parks. In fact, they have their own parks prescription program. There's researchers in Germany that found that being in nature helps improve one's creativity. The National Institute of Health Research in the UK partnered with Public Health England and also did a study on the effect of health and mental health. And it said it increased happiness and self-esteem, lowered blood pressure and sugar levels, less anger and depression, improved immune systems. And so I ask you, during the pandemic, we hope we're nearing the end of it. We've had a couple of breaks, and those of us who finally got a chance to leave our homes, where did we want to go? What were we looking forward to? Where were we taking our children and our grandchildren? We took them to green spaces. We wanted fresh air. We wanted to see trees. We wanted to see wetlands. That's where we went. So why are we thinking of destroying those areas which we hold so dear to us? And finally, one of the benefits is it fosters a sense of community and generosity. And I think by the presentations you've heard this evening and the ones that you will be hearing is those people live around that green space. And my final comment would be green space and the environment needs to be accessible. You shouldn't have to get in a car and drive to it. It should be near you. And here we have a community that has a wonderful protected area beside them to enjoy it. I ask you to consider these points of mine and others this evening. And again, I'll conclude by not being in support of this development and thanking you so much for your time this evening.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Thank you again. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Next, I have Dale Donaldson. No, that was on the other application. Okay. Kelly Rumble. Kelly Rumble, you're in the meeting. If you'd like to deactivate your microphone, there you go. And you have the floor.
Oh, there I am. Sorry, guys. Perfect. Honorable Mayor, esteemed councilors, and Value Planning Advisory Committee members, my name is Kelly Rumble. I've known most of you for several years now, and you know that I would not be in front of you unless the issue at hand was grave. First, I'd like to thank all of you for your service. It's been a long night, and I think it's been even more of a long year for all of us. It is with great admiration and respect that I address you here tonight. I'm here to talk to you about preserving green spaces in the city of Belleville. And tonight we're here to talk to you particularly about one. Over the last few weeks, you've witnessed Belleville residents rally against development. Not against development, but against the encroachment of our green spaces. And as you know, it is the developer's plan in this situation to create 156 residential homes at the end of Tessa Boulevard in place of the existing forest. The forest there is a multitude of hardwood forest that you've heard from Bill, and it goes on, that of which it's very concerning to the neighborhood. By now, city staff, you should have received over 100 pages of objections and a multitude of letters, calls, and emails, all in strong objection to this development. You have heard from a plethora of residents like Ray and Judy, Michael and Claudia, Richard and Vivian, Jerry and Nancy, along with Alex, regarding the trees. Simply put, this is a development that will not serve our residents and our neighborhood in any direction. When we were on the environmental call this week with the company, it was very concerning. First, we got the Belleville letter in the mail. Within 48 hours, we had the environmental company's letter in the mail, and they scheduled an open house in front of Belleville to get ahead of you. I strongly urge that the members of the planning committee request this video from the other night. It's about a 2.5 hour long video, of which it's very evident what their plans are. And I think that Ms. Jones even, she said, we have no intention of protecting the creek here. It's very obvious that this company has no dedication to our city. They're building subdivisions, not communities. And as an advocacy group here for green spaces, we're not against development in any regard. We're against the plowing of environmentally protected land such as this. You know, I myself own land in Northern Ontario that's environmentally protected, and I know that I'm a steward of that land. This organization here has a history of bulldozing and clear cutting, you know, properties with that have intrinsic value to this community. Any other city, including Toronto, knows that their green spaces are an asset to the city through, you know, like Bill said, mental health, etc. But here we have a company trying to push environmental setbacks, trying to ignore endangered species that are in the area, and ignoring, you know, ancient hardwood forests that are in there. I strongly question the validity, such as our, you know, mayor had stated of MASH's report. I'm actually going to go a bit further and not say I question the validity of it. I flat out say that it's erroneous. It's quasi-fictional in all regards. This was an environmental study or planning study that was designed to support their project. And in this video last week that they now are refusing to release, which they said would be released to the public, it was very obvious that they had made major negotiations with a conservation authority for this. So previously tonight, she had proposed that there was a 30-meter buffer, but on last week's call, she had already said that, Ms. Jones had already said that they had negotiated that buffer down to 25 meters. You know, the things that are concerning us are out of this world. You know, the call last week, you know, it's funny that one moment, this organization is saying that this is provincially protected wetland, but in the call last week, they were calling it nothing more than beaver activity. That's it. You know, their environmental report's a sham. It only identifies 40 of the plus 70 bird species that are there. And of the 40 they identified, 4 are endangered. They're not including 3 other endangered species that we've already identified there, such as the salamander, snapping turtles, and other species. You know, this subdivision is not something that we want in our backyard because it's just another subdivision. We want it not there because it's morally wrong. You've heard a lot of technical arguments today about that, whether it be planning committee or bylaws or et cetera, but you know, our community is ready to fight this full hand. We're seeing the destruction that's facing the south property right now, south of Dundas. And we simply ask, you know, the planning committee to do the right thing here and really look back at what our environmental legacy was 100 years ago and look back what our environmental legacy will be from 100 years from now. Do we want to be a city that's just endless pavement and subdivisions, or we want those breaks in there that encourage neighborhoods and communities and mental health and children playing? You know, there's been so much that's been said tonight that my speech that I wrote was basically thrown out the door, I think, by the time the third person started talking. But, you know, when you have an environmental company or a planning company, in this case, borderline lying to its residents on how much traffic there'll be and environmental degradation there will be, it's very, very concerning. You know, they're ignoring snapping turtles. They were given, on this video of last week, they actually disclosed to us that they'd already had talks with the Conservation Authority about giving them 61 acres in lieu of not putting a bridge across Victoria and pushing a setback to 25 meters. And also this big thing that our water retention area is going to actually encourage life, that it's going to replace that whole forest they cut down is what they were trying to sell us. Well, if you look at our stormwater management system in our neighborhood, I think there was a dead raccoon in there for most of the year last year, so no one went around it. They're trying to sell us something that does not exist. And even they disclosed that, you know, in the meeting last week, that they have no commitments to after this is approved. So this will be approved. You'll never hear from this company again. Some builder will come in here, just like it's a surprise that Hanley Park sold the other subdivision 5 years ago, which we were told last week was the truth. And I was told this week by CGI Construction that's down there clear cutting the site that they actually own the company. So the question is here, at what point do we say we're tired of being lied to, we're tired of being taken advantage to, and we stand up for the residents and the green spaces of the city? I want to thank you for your time tonight, and I trust that, you know, the planning committee will make the right decisions for its constituents tonight. Just one more in summation. In over a week, our neighborhood alone has been able to get close to 2,100 signatures in opposition for this subdivision. I would love to see the subdivision go into Belleville, but just not here. I would love for the city of Belleville to come up with a land swap. I know land inventory is not where it should be right now, but I'm asking for a solution here. And the solution here is not to build on that property, simply put. I thank you for your time tonight, and I hope to see you all soon.
Okay, thank you for your comments. So again, tonight's meeting is for the purpose of introducing the application, and we'll be referring this off to staff, so there will be no immediate approvals tonight. And just another comment, the city doesn't have a lot, or doesn't have an inventory of residential land. If we did, we would certainly be utilizing that for sale and probably for habitat and different things. So, but thank you for that comment. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Thank you again for your comments.
Thank you for your time.
I'm just going to go back to people we've missed just to make sure. Ada Mallory. No, okay. Bill Mahar. I know we had. Okay. So Bill Mahar, we had him attached to the meeting, but I think we had an audio issue. Mr. Mahar, if you're in the meeting, if you want to activate your microphone, it'll be on your bottom left of your screen. Mr. Mahar, if you could activate your microphone. Okay, I'm gonna move on. If people aren't getting through, obviously you're welcome to provide written comments as well, and you are listed here as a participant. Janet Fraser. No, okay. And then last one was Dale Donaldson. No, okay. All right, so we've went through the list of participants. So I need a motion to refer this to the Planning Advisory Committee. Councillor Kelly and Councillor Williams, all in favor? That's carried. 3.3 Notice of Complete Application and Introductory Public Meeting for Proposed Zoning Bylaw Amendment, Bylaw 3014, 1 Millennium Parkway and 888 City Street North, City of Belleville. File numbers B-77-1131. Owner is Millennium Venture Limited. Agent is Task Force Engineering Incorporated. And I'll have staff introduce the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject land is located on the northeast corner of Millennium Parkway and Sydney Street North, and it's presently developed with 2 commercial buildings. So the application is proposing to rezone the subject land from a highway commercial zone to a general commercial zone to permit a day nursery in the existing building on the south side of the subject land. So the one that's addressed 1 Millennium Parkway. The proposed day nursery would occupy approximately 594.6 square meters of the existing building, and it would include the provision of an outdoor play area outside of the building. The official plan designation of the subject land is commercial, and we have not received any correspondence regarding the application at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have Hillary Murphy from Task Force to make a presentation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. I'm without power here, so I'm by the light of my laptop. So I guess I don't know that I really have a presentation other than just some remarks that there's an existing vacant space within the building, and there is a tenant that's looking to build a day nursery in that location, and the current zoning does not allow for that. So we're looking for a rezoning that would allow for that type of development.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from committee members? No. I do have one question. As far as the outside play area goes, where would that be located in that proposal?
On the slide that was shown before, there's a green area that's hatched. So it would be in the southeast corner of the building. So there's 2 parking spaces that would be taken up, and it would wrap up around the east side of the building.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I don't know if that slide can come back up to show you.
And that's fine. We all have a visual. That's a very familiar piece of property.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, if no one has any questions, we also have Devinder Asi listed as speaking in favor of the application. No, okay. Can I get a motion to refer this to the Planning Advisory Committee? Councillor Kelly and Councillor Sanderson, all in favor? That's carried. I need a motion to adjourn this portion of the meeting. Councillor Sanderson, Councillor Kelly, all in favor? It's carried. Okay, moving on to the Plan Advisory Committee. Attendance, I see everyone's here. Disclosure of pecuniary interests and general nature thereof. Councillor Williams.
6.1, sir.
6.1 is noted. Confirmation of the minutes of the City Council Planning Committee meeting and Planning Advisory Committee meeting held on February 1st, 2021. Moved by Mr. Joyce, seconded by Ms. Brown. All in favor? That's carried. There's no deputations. Correspondence, I need a motion to receive all correspondence received with the clerk's office in relation to agenda applications. Mr. Baltuda, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So referrals from the public meeting. Councillor Williams has declared a conflict, and he will be removed from the meeting for this portion, and I will remember to bring him back when we move on. Okay, 6.1, notice of public meeting for application for revised proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, 99 Millennium Parkway, parts of lots 29 and 30, Plan 22, Part 6, Plan 21R-2584, City of Belleville, file numbers B-77-1105. Owner is 273-7778 Ontario Limited. Applicant is Sunny Puna. Principal Planners Report number PP-2020-13 refers. And the resolution is that report number PP-2021-13 dated March 1st, 2021 regarding notice of public meeting for application for revised proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, 99 Millennium Parkway, part of lots 29 and 30, Plan 22, Part 6, Plan 21R-2584, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies, and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering and Development Services Department. Is somebody to move that, please? Mr. Beltuda, seconded by Mr. Jennings. Any questions or comments? Mayor Panchuk.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carr. You know, I understand the frustration of residents, and you know, it's unfortunate, I think, for Mr. Puna that Mr. Malhotra did such a poor job in presenting with a level of sarcasm that really did border on disrespect for any of the neighboring residents' concerns about the type of development, the size of the development. You know, I was thinking as I was listening to the presentation where he was enumerating all the different potential uses that would not require any variances and would be permissible there. And it struck me that, you know, as a property owner, his client certainly could proceed with any of those developments, but he chose not to. They're choosing to go with this hotel. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to ask that when this comes back from staff with the information that was received, that they look at, in particular, the requested variances with respect to height, parking, and the space for the lanes, to see if the development could actually not have variances in those areas, and that they would actually comply with the requirements of zoning in that area. You know, I appreciate the fact that this is a brand, a well-recognized brand in terms of being a Hilton property. But I was concerned with the tone, and as I said, an obvious air of sarcasm that was dripping through the entire presentation. And while that is not a planning issue, I can imagine that the consultation with adjacent property owners would have gone in that similar manner. And I think it's important that you know, we look at how we can approve this without with the least amount of variance as possible moving forward. And I'll ask staff to incorporate that, please.
Okay, thank you. And I see Ms. McAdam there nodding her head, so she's acknowledged that. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Jennings.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. There was a lot of discussion, and people seem to be very upset about the references to the Bell Boulevard area. Now, I have looked through the official plan, and it is not clear because Schedule B plan does not show the limits of the Bell Boulevard area. So could we confirm that this is actually part of the Bell Boulevard area? Because I think it's discrediting either the planning person who has done it, or there's some other issue involved. But it seems to me that you know, do we have an old sketch of where that Bell Boulevard area is, please?
Ms. McAdam, would you care to answer that?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You're correct. There is no definition provided for the Bell Boulevard corridor in our current official plan. As far as I know, it's just that it's generally known as the area both north and south of Bell Boulevard. Therefore, it would not include the subject lands which are north of the highway. So the area, at least generally south of the highway, along that Bell Boulevard stretch, is what we generally refer to as the Bell Boulevard corridor.
So my guess then would be that this planning professional has other information that they are calling this part of the Bell Boulevard area. Perhaps they have an older map.
I can't comment in that regard, but we would not have provided information that this would be part of the Bell Boulevard corridor. It would only be part of the commercial designation, and the applicable policies of the official plan in that regard would apply, but not necessarily the specific policies with respect to Bell Boulevard corridor.
Okay, it just seems it's very confusing to me, and I'm sure everybody else, since there's no definition of where this area is. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's that critical, other than many of the public have brought it up as an issue of proof that the planning is not sound because it's not describing the area correctly. But I would really love to see a definition of those areas as per the official plan. I think that would be helpful for everybody.
Thank you. Yes, that item actually has been noted by staff as well. Also, me being a newer staff to the city of Belleville, that was one of the items that I was looking at. So your point is definitely well taken, and I agree that area should be more clearly defined moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this one? Ms. Brown.
I'll remember to unmute this time. I do have a question in terms of, I'm quite familiar with the area around Cloverleaf and Millennium Parkway. Do we or have we anticipated pedestrian traffic that will be using Millennium Parkway as a result of the hotel, when in fact there are no sidewalks on either the north or south side of Millennium Parkway? Something I think we should consider is that we can't expect that visitors staying at that particular hotel would want to immediately get back into their car to drive to Bell Boulevard.
There is sidewalks on the south side of Millennium right now along the car dealerships, but it doesn't extend beyond the further and around the bend, if you will. So going east, there's no sidewalks along anything there. So yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Joyce, I saw your hand.
Yes, they did. Further to what's been said and the mayor and kind of the tone, I mean, some of the questions I asked last meeting, Bell Boulevard concept that Paul was asking, but they are attempting to try to make this more acceptable to the area. But is there more they can do in terms of the berming or landscaping at the north end? Because I know that came up on a couple of the comments that they're going to put these little tiny trees or shrubs in. It's going to take forever and a day before they actually provide any kind of privacy. Can that be a condition on the next version of the report back, where they have, whether it be higher fencing or more landscaping that gives them more privacy? Because that seems to be a big issue here. I think without walking back there, you can see a lot of forest and berming there now, and that will be removed, or some of it removed as part of the development. So just a consideration for the next version, if that's possible. Thank you.
Okay. Yep, staff noted that. Any other questions or comments? The only thing I'm going to say is certainly that area has experienced a lot of development, and you know, some of the comments that were mentioned tonight, those houses are actually pre-amalgamation, pre-amalgamation, as one particular public member talked about. And it was 20 years ago when I was on council before that we actually extended Millennium Parkway out, bought a couple of houses for the purpose of taking some of that traffic off of Cloverleaf Drive. And as that continues to develop through there, the residents have accepted that development, but it's been along the lines of single story low impact. And, certainly, and I've said this before, any new development has to be complementary to existing development and not just simply be intrusive in nature. And I know that there's one particular hotel on North Front Street, the Country Inn, and I wasn't here for any of those decisions, but that's set right back and certainly has an awful view. And I wouldn't want to be the people who live in those houses and have that towering down. So certainly some things that staff will have to consider as that application gets reviewed. So with that, I need a motion, or I got a motion to approve that. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, 6.2, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed zoning bylaw amendment, bylaws 10-245, and proposed draft plan of subdivision, Hanley Park North, part of lot 14, concession 1, City of Belleville, file numbers B-77-1115 and 12T-20001. Owner is Hanley Park Developments Incorporated, and agent is Macaulay Shomi Housing Limited. The resolution reads that report number PP-2021-11 dated March 1st, 2021 regarding notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 10-245 as amended and proposed Hanley Park North draft plan of subdivision, part of lot 14, concession 1, City of Belleville, be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies, and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering and Development Services Department. Need somebody to move that. Mr. Baltutis and Councillor Kelly, questions or comments? Ms. Brown.
Councilor Carr, we need Councillor William Batley's back.
Oh, yeah.
He's back in.
The right thing I didn't do. I'm going to blame it on IT. Just because he can't say anything. Okay, Councillor Williams, you're back in. Ms. Brown, I had your, go ahead.
So throughout the public session earlier, there was often reference to this piece of land, which Hanley indicated that they own and have owned for about 30 years, that it's designated parkland. And so I'm trying to understand or get some clarity on, is it parkland or is it property that was used like parkland that was in fact private property owned by Hanley? And I think what's caused some of the confusion is there may or may not have been a map at some point for the City of Belleville identifying it as, I don't know whether it was identified as green space or parkland, but I would be very helpful for me to understand, is it in fact designated parkland for the city, or is it private property owned by Hanley that's been used as parkland over an extended period of time?
Ms. McAdam?
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is privately owned land, so it is not city-owned land, and it is not designated parkland. The designations over the land as it stands right now there's residential, and this is with respect to the official plan, residential. There's also environmental protection. And then there is a corner of rural up in the far northeast corner. But no, this is not current parkland for the City of Belleville.
Okay. Any other, Mr. Baltutis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, the land that they want to plan to develop on, it's residential, correct?
Ms.
In the
McAdam?
OP? The land where the actual dwelling units are, that would be the residential designated land, yes.
Okay, so in the OP, it's not, it is recognized as residential land, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
that
so-
area, and then the surrounding lands would be the environmental protection.
So if it's already designated residential, then why is he coming to us? What's he asking for? And maybe in simpler terms,
Sure.
please?
Yes. So currently, although a portion of the subject lands is designated residential, the zoning of the subject lands in that area is in a residential holding exception 1 zone. This zone is a unique zone category where it really only permits any residential dwelling that was existing at the date of passing of the zoning bylaw. So meaning if there was nothing there, then the zoning is basically a large holding zone on the property, meaning any new development needs to have a new zone category placed on it. So it needs to go through this public process in order to achieve whatever zoning is determined appropriate. So that's why this discussion is being had. Although the official plan has a portion of the land designated residential, the zoning doesn't permit any new residential development on the land.
Oh, okay, thank you. That explains it.
Mr. Jennings.
Hi there. Yeah, I had some clarification as well on, there seemed to be a lot of information, besides the fact that of questioning all of the professional opinions, some of the issues related to whether there was access or not and whether it's being actually developed wetland. From my understanding, they are not developing any designated provincial wetlands. I believe that is the case. And in fact, the subdivision is set back 30 meters from the edge of that protected wetland. I guess I would like confirmation that that's actually true.
Correct. So the current proposal that we have here tonight has the provincially significant wetlands completely set aside from the development, and then there's a 30 meter buffer up to the closest residential property. For the stormwater management pond, that's where you see the 25 meter buffer from the border of the wetland. So that's where that reference was being made. But yes, there is a 30 meter buffer between any residential development and the boundaries of the provincially significant wetland created in terms of the proposed development plan.
Okay, so it's just the area around the pond that this is what they were talking about in the public meeting, how they said they negotiated a 25 meter setback instead of 30. It's only around the pond.
I wasn't involved in the privately held public meeting, but that would be my understanding, is that because the only area that has that 25 meter is around the buffer is around the stormwater management pond. Okay.
The other issue I wanted clarification on, because it seemed like the consultant didn't have a great answer, was the access to this land. I mean, it's private land anyway, but the question was whether if it became a park, city owned, would there be any way to access it for the rest of the city? The plan I'm looking at, it seems very clear that they have in the 30 meter buffer zone that there are at least 3 or 4 access points for the public from the subdivision onto the 30 meter buffer zone. Is that correct? She didn't seem to explain that very well to me, but it looks like that's the way it's set up.
Yes, there was a few connections being shown as potential trail connections to the one main artery that as far as I understand already exists and has been carved in over time. Yeah, so that's essentially what's being proposed right there. And then we would be awaiting feedback with respect to our Parks Department in terms of any proposed trail and connections especially, and then also the Quinte Conservation Authority.
Okay, and so even if the city doesn't take over the offered wetland area, it looks like the development does in fact already include the construction of pathways and parks. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
I believe right now they are proposing a small park block at the northwest corner of the new subdivision. So that would be the actual park block there. They've proposed other open space or zoning more towards the interior of the site, which is in review, but that would be surrounded by environmental protection land. So it may not be appropriate for any future park because it may be difficult to access, but that's something that staff will be reviewing. And then the trails is what they've proposed as, I believe, a wood chip trail. So again, that would be something that our Parks Department would be looking at.
Okay, and then I don't know if it's who's running the meeting. Is it possible for me to share my screen to show you on one of the plans? A question that I have.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Can I do that? Yep. Let me try that. Okay, so I think I'm showing you the plan of subdivision. Is that? Do you guys see that?
Not yet.
Oh.
There we go.
Okay. So I guess what I'm looking at here is this seems to me to be an entrance, the pathway off the public area and into here. So this is the existing stormwater pond that they're concerned about the access into the emergency access. And then I see here that this is the 30-meter buffer zone from the existing wetland. Is that, am I interpreting that correct, Tessa? Sorry, my pen's a little thick.
Sorry, I'm just looking at my my copy of the plan here too, just to check the buffer on that side. Wetland boundary. Yeah. Yes. Yep. That would be the 30-meter buffer right up to that.
Okay, so
as far as I can see.
So the existing subdivisions don't have that 30-meter buffer zone, but the new subdivision will have that 30-meter buffer zone. Is that correct?
I believe that those are, they might be flood lines there. Greg, do you have any insight on that? They might not be actual buffer from the.
Oh, I lost my page.
Wetland?
Yeah.
It might be just a floodline delineation.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the engineering drawings for the other subdivision to confirm exactly what those are. I mean, it certainly Briarwood Crescent was built a number of years ago, and the standards may have been different at that time.
Okay, so I guess okay, so what they have said is they are putting the buffer zone, and there is parks there actually. So I think some of the public is misled that they think they're building the wetland. That seems to be what I'm understanding by a lot of the input, when I don't think that really seems to be the case. Am I misreading that, or?
The provincially significant wetland would be left untouched entirely. It would not be permitted to be developed. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the proposal is not, or the current proposed development is not proposing to build within the wetland.
Okay. I just wanted to clear that up because it seemed like I was getting different conflicting opinions from certain speakers compared to what I was reading on the plans.
Right.
So that's good. That clears that up for me. That was all I had to ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Williams and then Councillor Sanderson after that. So Councillor Williams.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I echo Mr. Jennings' comments. I think it is very clear that these were holding residential already zoned and land that was privately owned, the whole parcel. I do, though, and hear the concerns of the residents and understand the concerns with the environment and everything else. A couple of questions for staff. I guess just looking at this whole piece of land and if it's coming into our city land, if we looked at this being part of our Parks and Rec master plan of any kind of that land, and probably to staff also, you know, have we talked ever about you know, some I know we always do cash in lieu of parkland, but some of that being even a children's area. And the last concern, maybe through staff, third question would be, it looks like I am too concerned about the single entrance. Victoria being added as a second seems very logical. just making sure that for emergencies, what have you, is that something that staff have looked at as well?
Ms. McAdam?
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So with respect to parkland dedication, yes, so there's opportunities that either the city receives a 5% cash in lieu of, and there is proposed parkland dedication here, I suppose, as opposed to a cash in lieu. So what we will do is evaluate the proposed parkland, check the percentage that's being proposed, look at opportunities for that parkland if it is appropriate, and if it's, you know, in the best interest of the city to be developed as parkland in those locations, and then we would provide comments in that regard back to the applicant. And then if there was opportunities, as you mentioned, for a playground structure, that would be something also that would be nicely dealt with through our emerging Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So that can help inform where we need new playground structures in the city to support the residents in that way. So that's definitely something that could be considered, and if it was warranted and there was a block that would be deemed appropriate there, then it could be a possibility, but that would be something I would need to defer to our park staff for more comments on. With respect to, sorry, Councillor Williams, your next question was about the single access. Yes, so we will, we're reviewing the current our traffic impact study, and we will be looking at the proposed accesses and potentially asking investigation towards a secondary access.
Okay, thank you. And is that going to disrupt a lot of the planning, or is that seem to fit? I know that the proposal, I think the question was asked, and it seemed that they had looked at it, but it didn't really fit. Is that something though that is easy to do, or is that going to be something that's going to be cumbersome?
To be honest, I'm not quite sure. What we would want to see from a staff level is at least that option explored, and then let them come back to us with, you know, with an answer on this would be the alternative, but you know, this or this may need to be compromised. And then at least we know what the alternative is. If there is an opportunity for a second access, you know, it would be worthwhile exploring.
Okay, and last question, it might be something staff has already noted. A lot of comments on the environment, a lot of comments on maybe peer reviewing or looking at another environmental study to just have a look at that. So I don't think I have to ask the question. I think that there's been comments, and staff, I'm sure, will review that, but that seems to be a recurring theme on there. But thank you.
Right, I can add just one comment to that, in that the EIS that was submitted, we do send that and defer to the Quinte Conservation Authority as our expert authority in reviewing EIS, so environmental impact studies, and so we will receive comments back from them on the study and move forward with those.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sanderson?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, both Paul and Councillor Williams touched on many of the comments I was going to make, but any new subdivision, I thought going forward would have to include a fully finished park. So I don't know if that is what Desta was referring to when she talked about playground structure in the Parks and Master Rec Plan. But I thought new subdivisions had to have a finished park in it. Is that incorrect?
Ms. McAdam?
So with respect to the Planning Act, when it comes to considering planning applications in parkland, there's two opportunities. There's opportunity for the city to take a parkland dedication, so actually receive land to be used as park for that area, or when it's not determined necessary. So say, for instance, there's an adjacent park that's within walking distance to the new development, and it's determined that you know, this park adequately serves the community, then there's also an opportunity for a cash in lieu of parkland to be taken by the city instead. So the Parks and Recreation Master Plan will help identify where we do need more park space and what kind of park space that we need. And then through the recommendations made through that master planning process, that will help us determine what we need and where. So to make a long answer short, sometimes, but depending on the size and nature and location of the new subdivision, the nature of the park space is dependent on those factors.
Okay, thank you, Justin. I may be wrong, but I thought we were updating our subdivision agreements such that we would have tree canopies, we would have parks, completed parks. But it sounds like maybe I'm ahead of the curve on this thing. Okay, so the second point, I just want to reiterate, this is private land. The developers had it for, or the owner, I guess, not developers, had it for like 30 years. As I read the documents, there's no encroachment on the protected wetland. And is there anything, if this proposal weren't to go forward and the 11 acres or 11 hectares that they've identified as being for the development, is there anything that would stop him as the owner from going in there and just clear cutting it?
On our application forms, when an application is submitted to the municipality, the owner is not supposed to go in and make alterations to the site, including the clear cutting of trees, until a decision's made. So that is something that we have on our planning applications.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Jennings, I saw your hand, but before I go to you, I'll just ask if there's anybody first round, any questions or comments. Mr. Joyce.
Yeah, I think most of the comments have been made to date, and both Councillor Williams and Sanderson covered off most of the issues. But the one thing that it seemed to come out on a few occasions from different fronts was the whole traffic impact, and not just the second exit or entrance off of, say, Victoria. And we know the thoughts about that, as Mayor Panchuk asked one of the residents about that. But the whole issue of the construction access and emergency exit access, and how that may impact the wetlands and that buffer, because I wasn't clear when I listened to that and exactly where that was, if that's going to be impacted. I know we're trying to preserve at least the 30 meters, and I heard on a couple of the deputations from the residents, they would prefer more than 30 if possible, at least in some areas, but more specifically how the construction or the emergency access is going to impact the wetlands, along with the whole concept of two egress access points. So I think it's a fairly complicated response there, and should be borne in mind, obviously, in the next version. And as to the environmental part, that's something that's beyond at least my expertise at this point. So I guess I would go to the experts on that, as whether it be peer review or Quinte Conservation or whatever. That's my general question.
So with respect to traffic impact, those items would be reviewed, and if there is a construction access road proposed, that would also need to be reviewed as well. Yeah, right now staff are still reviewing the traffic impact study, and will determine need for peer review if necessary as well. And we can look at all of those additional questions, but unfortunately right now I don't have those answers.
Appreciate that. No, thank you.
Any other questions or comments first round? Mayor Panchuk.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I'm going to come back to the issue of the length of time that they own, this property owner owned the land, because I think it is relevant in terms of as we look at this this development going forward. But I would first start off by saying that when we looked at the extension of Hague Road, as was always intended to go north, one of the issues we looked at was alternative routes, and there was no ability to put a roadway to the east of Mercedes Meadows to go through that route because of the environmental lands. And so, you know, any discussion about a construction route or an alternative exit becomes really problematic, particularly with the information that we had just I think 3 years ago as we made that decision. And so I offer that just because I was involved with trying to find you know, alternatives, and they just weren't there. And they weren't there because the environmental implication of these lands make it very, very complicated. So I'm not sure, Ms. McAdam, if you could answer this question, and I'm not even sure if Mr. Pynchon can answer it. But the reason why I asked about the original ownership of this, the Hanley farm, was because for many, many years, there was a application for a subdivision that City Council had to continually renew every 5 years. And the concern that City Council had was that we were counting the number of potential lots and structures into our sewer capacity limits for the city. And it got so bad that last term we actually had to say that we were not going to renew that again if it did not proceed with development. And so the question I have is that sanitary sewer capacity, was it on the part of the land that was sold a few years ago, which now is under development south of that? Or did it also include these 156 units in this area?
Ms. McAdam?
For this question, I'll ask Greg if he has any additional information. I know that we were looking into some background information on the history of this area and densities allocated by the former official plan. It is my understanding that there may have been some densities allocated per hectare to this area, but perhaps Greg, if you could shed some maybe more specifics on that.
Certainly. Yes, through the chair. I note that the subdivision that had draft approval that had been extended for several years, going from 2006 out to the present, it was strictly just dealing with the lands that were south of the creek, what's now referred to as Parkville Greens. So this land was never factored into that. That being said, yeah, we did do some background research today and determined that the official plan, those lands, both north and south, were annexed from Thurlow in 1986. And so the official plan, when it was updated in 1988, designated residential land use in both of those areas, with the exception of the lands around the creek, which were designated as environmental. And unlike the current official plan that was adopted in 2002, the previous official plan also assigned density numbers to those parcels and had them mostly within the low density calculation, which mirrors the low density under our current official plan. With, I believe there was one spot in the south area that was to a second density, which was slightly higher. But ultimately, yeah, this subdivision was never draft approved in this northern area, so there hadn't been anything previously allocated to it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And again, the reason why I think it's relevant was because this area was never contemplated as being residential, regardless of how the holding symbol was put on it. The south part, which is now under development, was always the area that was considered. And it was considered by the planning department because of those capacity issues for sanitary and water and whatnot. And while Tessa Boulevard and Spruce Gardens was oversized to allow for it before, there was nothing that the city had said that we had contemplated or we had approved. So this really is the first start. And I want to go back to a question I think Mr. Jennings asked Ms. McAdam about this residential status, or maybe it was Ms. Baltudis, this residential status, which you said was a holding status. Can you again explain for me, what does that mean in the sense of it's residential, but it has to get approved to go ahead as residential?
So the official plan designates this certain area on the subject lands as residential. However, the zoning is called the title of the zoning is Residential Holding Exception 1 Zone. So the only thing that this zone permits is existing residences that there are existing residences that existed at the date of the passing of the zoning bylaw, meaning if any new development is to be contemplated in this area, the land needs to be rezoned completely. It needs to move to a new zone category. So it needs to move to a residential zone category that permits new residential development, because this current zone only basically permits what's there.
Okay, so because I was confused by some of the conversation. So unless there was a dwelling on the property, this has never been zoned as residential.
No, it is only zoned. The name is called residential holding, but it only permits an existing residential dwelling that would have existed when the zoning bylaw was passed.
You know, I'm smiling because we often hear from residents about the fact that they moved into an area and they were told nothing was going to come beyond us because of the way it was, and that some unscrupulous salesman sold them a premium, and we have this happen many times in the city. But you know, it's rare that it's actually true, and it is in this case here, because this land was never designed to be developed residential. It was always supposed to come back to this point. So anyone who was speaking and saying this was a site for new development in the future would be wrong, and I think that's important. I want to also deal with, I got a letter today from, an email today from a resident talking about Prince Edward County increasing the wetland setback requirements. I believe 30 meters is what we're talking about. They've now gone to 50 meters. And so I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but perhaps that could be something that when the report comes back to the planning committee, and then whatever the recommendation will be to council, that we can include what a 50-meter setback would do to the potential project. The next thing I want to come back to is a question that Mr. Jennings brought up. And if I go to the presentation that was given to us by the developer, if we go to slide 3, which is the proposed plan of subdivision, I'm just trying to understand access to the green space again, because unfortunately, the questions that were asked earlier made them a little bit more confusing for me than perhaps. So I used to live, you know, fairly close to this area, and I spent a lot of time with my children, just like many of the residents are going through that area. So it's my understanding that if we break this development into the north part and the south part, the north part, there are about 6 lots for detached homes to be built. And I see the green space in the more dark green space, which says it's for parks. And I'm imagining that space will be used to get into the area that is the Block G open space area for residents to go to. And as I said, there are 6 lots in that area. But if I go to the south part, and I'm assuming based on the math that there's 150 dwellings that we're proposing for that area. And I see on the west side where the proposed townhouses are, I see the walkways to the green space that's there. But I guess going to the Block G is what I was asking about, because a lot of folks that will be on that road on the east side of that property, they would be wanting to go, you know, to the other area as well. That's where I was asking Ms. Jones earlier, is what they're proposing to have access. And so, unless I'm reading this incorrectly, Ms. McAdam, other than at the very top where there is that at the entrance, just where the line is with Tessa, that's the only access for this portion to the sort of the northeast of that Block G. Am I correct in that?
Yes, and however, we likely wouldn't encourage people moving through the wetland to access that Block G. So that is something that staff are going to be reviewing if you know that Block G is appropriate in terms of the fact that it does not look like it can be accessed by the residents or other users of that potential area, and may, you know, we will review its appropriateness as it's proposed as open space.
Well, that kind of is what makes this whole development really complicated, because you know, it's going to, and particularly if the land is deeded to the city or the conservation authority, then we have liability issues and whatnot. But it's I appreciate that clarification. You know, again, the property that is on the west side of that southern area, you know, there's a considerable amount less that is usable for residents to walk from a recreation point of view, and they really do lose a lot of area. Traffic access, you know, I appreciate the questions that were asked, and I asked them earlier about moving through there. You know, again, on the Spruce Gardens side of this development, 6 homes are not going to really bring all that traffic along Spruce Gardens as it goes west to Hague Road, but 150 dwellings on the south part using Tessa Boulevard, which, you know, again, I was just there on Saturday taking a look for myself in the neighborhood. That is not a high density or a high traffic design road. It is a neighborhood, you know, street with children who are playing in the front and whatnot. And so, you know, we do have to take a look at that traffic issue. But I also think that, you know, we have to incorporate also what traffic from the subdivision that's being built now south of this, south of Bridge Street, is going to do to the Hague Road area in total. And so I have a lot of serious concerns about this proposed development. You know, you know, it's an important factor for me to know that this was never zoned for residential use, other than if there were existing structures. This is a new proposed development that was not intended when the site was rezoned. I think that traffic issues, the loss of green space, having a construction route through the green space is not a starter for me. And, you know, so that we have a lot of hurdles to overcome to consider this. And I know that you've gotten lots of notes, Ms. McAdam, and it'll come forward to us. But I want particularly residents who have submitted all this information to know that that we've heard them, and these issues will have to be dealt with through this process. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. Any other questions or comments first round? Okay, I'll go back to Mr. Jennings. Thanks for your patience.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. No apologies.
My concern also was the traffic study, I guess. It had brought, there was a little bit of confusion there and perhaps a misunderstanding on how traffic volumes are calculated, you know, based on the number of cars or the number of trips. And then there was brought into question about whether the study was done during times of COVID and whether that was appropriate. So I was hoping that perhaps the city could give us a little bit of a review, maybe just a layman's explanation on traffic volumes, and explain how it's not based on the number of cars that live in the neighborhood, and then maybe address the specific COVID concerns as far as the survey goes for that particular report. Thank you.
Greg, I'm not sure if Jessica is in the meeting. We have to defer to an engineer for this one.
Yeah, unfortunately we will. And no, I believe she's watching the meeting and collecting comments to address, but I don't believe she's able to speak at this point.
So it's Stephen Ashton speaking here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Director Ashton.
So it's basically, the modeling is basically I think, as the consultant pointed out, it's the car trips per peak hour. And what she was saying was that you maybe some people leave for work from 8 to 9, and that would be a peak hour. Some other people may leave for work at 9:30, so they wouldn't be included. So it's just how much traffic's on the road. So and then there's the 2 peak points in time. So a lot of the modeling is based upon sort of best practices and sort of approved engineering models to define that. So in terms of COVID, yes, there has been reduction in traffic. So modeling has been to add a percentage to what maybe the existing road pattern has. So I think what's important to note is that our development approval engineer is being also looking at this meeting, and we'll have a full analysis of the traffic impact study that was submitted. We'll make sure that whatever the recommendation or whatever the review is, it will hold up within if there is an appeal down the road. So we will look at it, and we will make sure that whatever comes forward for the committee is technically sound and justifiable. So that's going to be a task, and the people who have submitted this application are not rushing this application. They know that there's a lot of community concerns, so everyone's going to take their time to make sure that all the issues are addressed.
Mr. Jennings.
Excellent. I would just like to say that I think from what I've noticed, the people are having trouble understanding how that number is derived. So if we could validate to them that it's a legitimate way to calculate the volume, I think that the city vouching for it is probably a good idea. If our engineers agree with the methodology and it's the standard methodology, then I think that should be communicated to the public so they feel confident in those numbers.
Yeah, through the chair, that the traffic is definitely one of those is a matter that needs to be properly reviewed and addressed. So yeah, we will make sure that there's thorough explanation and analysis of the modeling they used and whether it was appropriate or not in this case.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I got a motion on the floor. All in favor? It's carried. 6.3, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 3014, 1 Millennium Parkway and 888 City Street North, City of Belleville. File numbers B-77-1131. Owner is Millennium Venture Limited and agent is Task Force Engineering Incorporated. The resolution reads that report number PP-2021-12 dated March 1st, 2021 regarding notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, 1 Millennium Parkway and 888 City Street North, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies, and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering and Development Services Department. Get somebody to move that. Mr. Joyce, seconded by Mr. Beltutis. Any questions or comments on this one? Mr. Joyce.
Sorry, I meant to ask through the chair, I meant to ask Ms. McAdam before, is the play area going to be grass? Like right now it's all pavement and whatever. Are they going to convert it to a grass fenced area for the kids? I know it's a minor point, but I just wanted to make sure that was the case.
Good question. Right now, we have limited details on the outdoor play area at the rezoning stage, but I can find that information out from the applicant and we can include it in the report either way as to what they're proposing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried. All right, moving on to reports. 7.1, recommendation report for proposed amendment to zoning bylaws 2076-80 and 10245 as amended, part of block 65, block 66, plan 21M-288. Part lots 33 and 34, concession 1, former township of Sydney, now City of Belleville. File numbers B-77-1117. Owner is Potters Creek Developments Incorporated and Dual Holdings Limited. The agent is RFA Planning Consultant Incorporated. The resolution reads that Planning Advisory Committee recommends the following to City Council. That application B-77-1117 to amend the City of Belleville zoning bylaw number 2076-80 and zoning bylaw number 10245 as amended for part of Block 65, Block 66, Plan 21M-288, Part Lots 33 and 34, Concession 1, former Township of Sydney, now City of Belleville, be approved as follows. That bylaw number 2076-80 as amended be repealed in its entirety for the subject land as shown in attachment 1. That Schedule A map number 3 of bylaw number 10245 as amended be amended by extending the schedule to include subject land as shown in attachment 1. And that zoning bylaw number 10245 as amended be amended by rezoning the subject land to residential fourth density R4-48 zone and a new residential fourth density R4XX exception zone, residential fifth density R5-43 zone, and a new residential sixth density R6-XX exception zone with all the provisions to permit the development of 261 dwelling units consisting of 82 lots for single detached dwellings, 14 townhouse units, and an apartment block containing a total of 165 in 3 4-story buildings. And that council supports the connection of Siena Avenue to Avonlow Road, which will be detailed in the traffic study required for the future phases of the Potters Creek subdivision. Somebody to move that, please. Mayor Panchuk, seconded by Councillor Sanderson. Any questions or comments on this one? Mayor Panchuk.
I just have a couple comments. I just want to say thank you very much to Ms. McAdam, and Director Ashton and the staff for working with, the developer, Adrian Bax, along with his consultant, Ruth Ferguson Altos. There were concerns. We had some concerns at the meeting. We asked them to be addressed, and, clearly it has been in this. And I received a very nice letter this afternoon from one of the residents who had concerns previously with the way this was going, and there's still some work to be done in the next phases, as has been stated. But the gratitude of the neighborhood, and what I wanted to say was that he says that I am grateful for the confidence and reassurance provided by the effort and work of Ruth Ferguson Altos on behalf of Adrian Bax, and for that of the city staff led by Director Stephen Ashton. The formal request made by Mayor Panchuk and Councillor Carr for city staff to address these concerns has resulted in real and positive movement in the right direction. I'm very grateful for the effort and genuine interest in the welfare of the Hastings Park residents shown by many members of the Planning Committee, particularly for the time invested to meet and visit our neighborhood, given by Councillors Carr, Sanderson, Kelly, and myself, as well as Catherine Brown and David Joyce. Mr. Destin goes on to say, your work and honest caring for the concerns of citizens has been well noted and appreciated by the residents of our neighborhood. And then he goes on to say, I would also like to recognize the time, effort, and sound advice provided over the summer by former Councillor Pat Culhane. It should come as no surprise that Pat went above and beyond to help and advise us, even though we had no prior personal connection. Her guidance and advocacy for meeting policy discussion has been invaluable. And I wanted to read that because, this is a demonstration of what happens when we work together through this process, developers, city staff, but also residents. And, I often tell developers who come to me to start the conversation early, to let people know what it is that you're proposing so that they have an opportunity for input as you go along. And this was, I think, how that was supposed to work. So I want to add my personal thanks. I look forward to having this come to council on Monday and moving forward with these next stages. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this report? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. 7.2 recommendation report request to redline draft plan of subdivision approval, phase 9A, Potters Creek subdivision, part of block 65, block 66, plan 21M-288, part lots 33 and 34, concession 1, former township of Sydney, now city of Belleville, file numbers ER-96, -12T-06501. Owner is Potters Creek Developments Incorporated and Dual Holdings Limited. Agent is RFA Planning Consultant Incorporated. The resolution reads that pursuant to section 5144 of the Planning Act, Council of the Corporation of the City of Belleville approved the request to modify the draft approved plan of subdivision, file numbers 12 T-06501 for phase 9A of the Potters Creek subdivision submitted by RFA Planning Consultant on behalf of Potters Creek Developments Incorporated and Dual Holdings Limited as shown on attachment 4 to approval section report number APS-2021-07 and grant redline approval subject to the draft plan conditions included as attachment number 5 to same. Get somebody to move that. Mr. Joyce, seconded by Mr. Baltutis. Any questions or comments on this one? All in favor? That's carried. Moving on to information items, 8.1 official plan and zoning bylaw amendment monitoring report and report to March 1st, 2021. I get somebody to move to receive that. Councillor Williams, seconded by Ms. Brown. Any questions or comments on those contents? Seeing none, all in favor? That motion is carried. General business and inquiries. Does anybody have anything? No, it's been a long meeting. Okay, so I have closing remarks. The Planning and Advisory Committee applicable decisions will be forwarded to City Council for consideration, forming part of the agenda for the City Council meeting to be held. And with that, I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Mr. Baltutis. All in favor?